I'm going to get a... Excellent. Okay. Welcome, team, to our August 26, 2025 episode of the Portland Planning Commission. I'm going to call us to order because we have quorum, which is always exciting. With us today is Commissioner Alvaretto, Commissioner Brannon, myself, Chair Routh, Vice Chair O'Mara, Commissioner Knowles, and Commissioner Ames, and Director Diefendorfer and Autumn Buckridge. And we have a full complement of folks who are planning to, I believe, planning to testify today. So thank you all. Before we start, we will try to commit ourselves with all deliberate speeds so we make sure that we can pay full attention to you. Want to start off with any items from commissioners? Items of interest? Okay, I always have one or two. One, Sunday Parkways is coming to downtown Portland on September 14th, which is very exciting. And since we won't be here for another month, I want to call to attention on September 18th, AARP Oregon is hosting their annual Age-Friendly Oregon Summit. It is actually going to be at PSU this year. And they have two breakout sessions that are specific to housing and aging in community with dignity. So registration is free and all are welcome to attend. And with that, I would love to invite Patricia Diefendorfer, Director Diefendorfer, to do the director's report. Thank you.
Chair Routh, I think we would like to get a head nod vote on the public infrastructure transmittal letter.
I'm so sorry. Yep. We have a transmittal letter for the Public Infrastructure Environmental Code project that was sent to us on Friday, and then I did a couple of edits. Would anyone, and Commissioner Spivak has just joined us, would anyone, can we get a thumbs up? Everyone good with transmittal letter?
Get a chair for.
Okay, great. And now to the director's report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Routh. I think we'll just take one moment. I believe we're locating another chair for Commissioner Spivak. Sorry about these logistics with a full commission now. Yeah, here we go. Right here is great. Perfect. We can share the screen here. This is great. All right. Thank you so much. I do have a few quick items for the director's report. wanted to start out by picking up on a conversation that we had at our last meeting about the Development Review Advisory Committee, or otherwise known as DRAC, more commonly known as DRAC. And Chair O'Mara has expressed an interest in being the Planning Commission liaison. I believe I hope I'm not mischaracterizing that. Vice Chair, pardon me. Vice Chair O'Mara has expressed an interest in being the Planning Commission designee or liaison to that committee. There is a nomination process, but I was reviewing the commission's bylaws, and we do have provisions in the bylaws that say that we would do, a discussion and kind of vote in support of a nominee or a representative to join another board or commission. So, Chair, I was hoping we could just take a few moments and just have a conversation and make sure that everyone on the commission is in support of Vice Chair O'Mara being the designee as she goes through, to go through the nomination process.
Thank you. Any thoughts? I believe we do need to vote. Yeah.
I guess if we're going to do a formal vote.
Motion first.
Motion, yeah, I was just
then I
going to
can
suggest.
Yeah.
If there's any discussion, but then motion and second, and then we can vote.
Would anyone like to make a motion? I will. All right. All right. Commissioner Knowles, so moved. Second?
I'll second.
Oh, great. Commissioner Spivak. Sorry, too slow.
And I just want to confirm my interest in serving as the Planning Commission representative to DRAC. As I understand it, it would start in November, so there is still a process. But I have met with staff that oversees that committee and have had some of my questions answered. And I'm really looking forward to taking some of the legislative work that we do here at Planning Commission and hopefully understanding a bit about permitting implementation of that legislation and then bringing that information back to you all at Planning Commission. So thank you for your support.
We still need to do the vote, right? Yeah.
Okay. Autumn, could you call the roll? I think this is a roll call.
Commissioner Alvarado?
Aye.
Commissioner Ames?
Aye.
Commissioner Brannon?
Aye.
Commissioner Knowles? Aye. Vice Chair O'Mara?
Aye.
Commissioner Spivak?
Aye.
And Chair Routh?
Aye. Woo. We can all go home now.
All right, so I will continue very quickly with the remainder of the director's report. Actually, also related to DRAC, Commissioner Spivak did, I think Autumn sent on behalf of Commissioner Spivak a request to commissioners to share any ideas that they may have about what they'd like to see on DRAC's work plan over the next 1 to 2 years. So if you have any ideas, please do send those to Autumn, and Autumn will go ahead and forward them to Eli. And Eli will, Commissioner Spivak will share those with the DRAC committee. So that's all related to DRAC. And then just a couple of other quick updates, just to keep you apprised of projects that this commission has seen. We updated previously about the code alignment project, and the status of that project currently is that I believe we updated that it did go to the Homeless and Housing Committee on August 12th, where it was unanimously recommended without amendments to the full council. And the full council will hear the project on September 3rd. So that's a project that is fully going through the council process. And then also, you may recall some time ago, this commission last year made a recommendation on Gresham-Portland urban service boundary amendments. And those amendments are now scheduled for the Climate Resilience and Land Use Committee on September 11th. So just wanted to provide that update. And then a couple of calendar reminders. September 9th, as you know, the next, what would have been the regularly scheduled meeting is canceled. During that time, the new commissioners will have a training on a variety of topics, so that the new commissioners will be busy that day, even though the commission's not meeting. I think that's all that I have for now. Happy to answer any questions if there are any. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Director Dievendorfer. Any questions? Okay. The next is our consent agenda, which is a recommendation from our August 12th minutes. Could anyone? Commissioner Alfredo, this is your big moment. Thank you so much. How about a second?
Seconded.
Excellent. And this is a straw poll. All in favor? Let's go aye. Okay. Any opposed? Delightful. Okay. Thank you so much. Our next, the big attraction of the day, Affordable Housing Opportunities Project. This is a briefing, a hearing, and the possibility of a recommendation if we get there. And so we will first, because this is a public meeting, we will first hear, yes, please, Bill Cunningham, Hector Rodriguez Ruiz, please come up. We will hear a brief presentation from staff. Then there will be any questions for pure clarification or information from commissioners before we go into hearing testimony. And just very grateful to everyone who, again, who shared their testimony on the MAP app and or joined us in person or online today. Before we get into the briefing, I just want to ask if there are any disclosures from my fellow commissioners on this one.
Commissioner Ames, for the record, I just wanted to share, I am a project manager with Walsh Construction, and Home Forward is one of our clients. So just wanted to disclose that. But I'm not currently working on any of the subject properties.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, and also just for information, most of the time, commissioners can only have a potential, this is a fun fact, a potential conflict of interest because we are not the final legislative body. So we recommend to City Council, but because we are not the final legislative body for this, ours is a potential conflict of interest, not an actual conflict of interest. I have now gone into the weeds. Bill Cunningham, Hector Rodriguez Ruiz, please take us to a different place.
Commissioners, I'm just going to start us out for the first couple of slides. So if you can share screen. Okay, great. There it is. Perfect. All right. So as noted by the chair, this project is the Affordable Housing Opportunities Project. This project is proposed amendments to comprehensive plan map and the zoning map for select sites that are dispersed throughout the city, and you will see in the presentation more detail about that. This project, the goal of this project is to either facilitate opportunity for new affordable housing or to preserve existing affordable housing, which is located in zones where the zone, it's a non-conforming use of the zone. And so by giving it a zone that makes it a conforming use, you facilitate the preservation of that housing. So, and these sites are sites that are either publicly owned or owned by nonprofit affordable housing developers. So that's basically what this project is. So next slide, please. The agenda, as noted by the chair, the agenda for this item for this evening is a staff presentation. It will be followed by public testimony. Then the commission will close, the chair will close the testimony, and the commission can ask questions and have discussion. And then ultimately, if the commission is ready to vote and make a recommendation, then that could also happen this evening. So that's the outline for the item today. And I think with that, I think I'd do one more slide. And I think I covered some of this in my opening remarks, but the proposal before the commission and the action that's before the commission is staff proposes that the Planning Commission recommend to the City Council that they adopt the Affordable Housing Opportunities Project proposed draft, and that they adopt the amendments to the comprehensive plan map and the zoning map as applicable on these 19 properties to support the objectives that I mentioned, which is preservation and facilitation of new affordable housing. And with that, I will turn it over to Hector. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Hector Rodriguez Ruiz. My pronouns are him. Wait, this is loud. This is a very targeted scope project. So I'm going to do an overview to get us where we're coming from, where are we basing this from. This is a small team from BPS. It's me. I got the role from the project management. My coworker here, Bill, and Rachel Hoy, who cannot be with us today, but like she's watching. So hi, Rachel. And the reason we're doing this project is because we're still going through the affordable housing crisis. We have an estimate shorted about 24,000 affordable housing units. And even though we have also like 50% of our renters are cost burden. As you imagine, this also is like more visible, the impacts they have in community and colors. And we have a graphic here that I can help you understand like how bad the crisis is. Like, for example, the green area is what is affordable right now for like a average 2-bedroom unit for a family of two with an average income in a Black household. So you can see it's very limited what is affordable right now in the city. And this is why we are thinking like we need to come with this type of projects. So this type of project is coming out from the housing production strategies. This is one of the strategies from the 35 that was implemented and adopted. This is A5, which is promoting affordable housing to rezoning site for affordable housing. The Bureau and the city have done a similar project before, so we are adopting what has been done and accommodating like what the current needs right now. So in the past, we have the expanded opportunity for affordable housing. We changed the name for AHOP because EOAH is kind of hard to say. And those projects were adopted in 2020 and 2021. The main difference was like those projects were doing changing code and zoning code and working with faith-based organizations. AHOP is focusing to work with affordable housing providers that come from the public sector, the public agencies, and nonprofits. So where are we coming from? We began with an open call for like housing providers to see what are the barriers that are going right now through zoning. And through those conversations was like zoning is a constraint to preserve some of the non-conforming units and also to move forward to provide more units. This project addressing the constraints for new opportunities for new development. We will add the capacity at citywide for 900 additional affordable housing units. Just the fact that we're preserving existing affordable housing through existing non-conforming to be conforming, we are preserving about 576 existing affordable housing units, which help with the housing crisis and also with the displacement that our communities can face. So the key factor for the site selections, we came in at first with a big list, and we wanted to make sure that this project was like keeping a very targeted scope. So we wanted to make sure that the ownership were through a public agency, public housing providers, and nonprofit that already own the land. The location have to be linear transit and services because we want to make sure that affordable housing it also represent an affordable cost of life. We also consider the agency zoning to be consistent with the area or the neighborhood. We also make sure that that we were following the policy alignment as like the comprehensive plan, and we wanted to make sure that these like are properties that are going to be near to midterm ready to continue providing affordable housing. Here's a map that we created. This is a citywide map, and you can see the distribution of all the project properties, which is in total 19, are through the 4 districts. We make a subdivision here so it will be more easier to understand. like housing providers. We have about 9 properties. By public agency, we mean land that is owned by the public right now, and we, unlocking this, will allow to provide affordable housing on those lands, which is currently not allowed. And we have about 7 non-conforming situationships. And non-conforming situation can be like the scale of the building or like the services that they're providing. So you can see more details through the report. We're gonna have some examples of the properties that we are proposing here with the maps. And now Bill is gonna go through them to get you more like in detail of like what I propose in here. Thank you.
Thank you, Hector. This is Bill Cunningham, also at the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, part of the AHOP project team. Hector was giving you a very high-level overview. I'm going to start diving into some of the details of the project proposal. I will be focusing on a small selection of examples of the different types of zone changes, and I'll say a little bit about those different types moving forward. And I also wanted to note that although we may be using a term zone changes, and all of the proposed property mapping changes involve zone changes, most, but not all, also involve amendments to the corresponding comprehensive plan map designation. And I'll note that as we go through some of those examples. This slide and the next are a full listing of the properties proposed for mapping changes. This first slide is showing 9 properties that are owned by housing providers, and this includes both nonprofit and public housing providers. And for all these 9 properties, these are situations where the zone change would support providing additional affordable homes. So these are the properties that we found there are some constraints to providing additional housing. The housing providers are interested in providing additional affordable homes, but we're encountering constraints in the current zoning of those properties. And just to highlight, a key purpose of this project is really recognizing the assets we already have in terms of properties that are already owned by nonprofits and public agencies, and seeing how on those properties we could really do more to accommodate the city's housing need. The next slide is showing a couple other types of zone changes. The first set of 3 properties are properties that are owned by public agencies where currently the zoning does not allow housing at all. And these zone changes would open up those properties to at least the opportunity in the future for affordable housing development. Next, we have non-conforming situations. These are 7 properties involving situations where typically it's existing affordable housing that's non-conforming in scale with the current zoning. There's one also that has non-conforming services. But for the most part, these properties already have affordable housing that's larger in scale than current zoning typically allows. So these zone changes are more about continuing or preserving rather than creating new opportunities for development. I just wanted to note that there are several project partners in the room, including Julie Livingston with Home Forward, Lee Armstrong with Habitat for Humanity, and at least virtually, I believe Guy Ben with TriMet will be here and will be available for questions. Moving on to the next slide before we dive into the individual examples, just wanted to provide a very brief overview of the zones that are involved with the zone changes, just to make sure we're all on the same page. For those of you familiar with the way we at least provide short names for these zones, we have zones like the RM1 and RM2 zone, and typically for the multi-dwelling and commercial mixed-use zones, the smaller number means smaller scale, higher number means somewhat larger scale. One of our most common multi-dwelling zones is the RM1 zone. That's typically intended for development 2 to 3 stories, intended to be fairly compatible with single-family zone areas. And then RM2 zone, that's more 3 to 4 stories. It's a zone that's common in some of our mixed-use centers and along our transit corridors. Moving up the scale in the multi-dwelling zones, we have RM3 and RM4. That's a much larger scale, 6 to 10 stories. And this is really being just applied to properties where we already have very large buildings. In the commercial mixed-use zones, we have CM2. That's typically a 3 to 4 story scale zone. It's very common along our main streets, in our mixed-use centers and neighborhood corridors. And then we also have the CM3 zone, somewhat larger scale, 5 to 6 stories. It sometimes applies on our larger streets as well as our larger town centers and close-in areas. And one reason why affordable housing providers can benefit in some cases from the mixed-use zones is that they're often interested in providing not just the housing, but services to help meet the needs of the residents and often as well people in the surrounding area. So I'm going to start diving into the examples of the zone changes. And the first few properties I'm highlighting here are examples where there are opportunities to provide more or additional affordable homes on sites. And these are properties owned by housing providers, both nonprofit and public. The first example is Prescott. We call it the Prescott property. This is in Council District 2 in the Cully neighborhood. It's a vacant site owned by Habitat for Humanity. It's located along Northeast Prescott near the Cully Neighborhood Center and nearly across the street from an elementary school. Current zoning for this 3/4 acre property is single dwelling R7. The proposed zone change to multi-dwelling RM1, that's that small scale, fairly compatible with single family area zone, would accommodate Habitat's interest in developing townhomes that would provide affordable ownership housing. Clusters of townhouses on large sites are not allowed in those single dwelling zones, and this would facilitate that ability to provide that ownership housing. Accompanying this zone change, and I should mention that immediately adjacent to the property to the east, there are properties that already have RM1 zoning. Along with the zone change would be a change in the comprehensive plan map designation from R7 to multi-dwelling neighborhood. And that's a designation we typically apply in fairly low-scale neighborhoods. Our zone change to RM1 would be consistent with policies for locating housing, including affordable housing, close to services such as you have in the Cully Neighborhood Center and the school. The next example is DeMar Downs. This is a 1.5 acre property owned by Home Forward on Southeast 148th, just south of Division Street. This is in Council District 1 in the Centennial neighborhood. It's located very close just to the south of the Division FX transit line. It's across the street from a Fred Meyer supermarket. And it's adjacent to park property that includes a community garden, but is, as of yet, actually largely undeveloped. Both Southeast 148th and Southeast Division are designated in the comprehensive plan as mixed-use corridors, which are intended to be locations for multi-dwelling housing and services. Development currently consists of single-story apartment buildings built in 1972. The current zoning is that small-scale RM1 zone. The proposed zoning is the mid-scale RM2 zone. And this zone change would allow Home Board to consider plans for providing for additional affordable homes on this property. There is no impending development happening. Zone changes needed to even consider possibilities for providing additional housing on that property and others in the proposal. Accompanying this zone change would be a change to the comprehensive plan map designation for the property from multi-dwelling neighborhood to multi-dwelling corridor. And that designation is appropriate on streets that are designated corridors such as 148th and Division. And you might note in parentheses, just to the north of the property, closer to Division, we already have the comprehensive plan designation of MDC, which is multi-dwelling corridor. And this zone change to RM2 would be consistent with policies for supporting affordable housing development and very specifically locating multi-dwelling housing close to services and transit, which you have in this situation. I will, this is one of the properties where we, during the discussion draft phase, we received a number of comments, and we'll be saying a bit more about that later when we talk about community engagement. And that's the same case with other properties that we're providing examples for. Just wanted to talk about the zone change to begin with, then come back to what we heard. The next property, this is what's sometimes known as the Canton Grill site. This is a 1-acre property owned by Apano. Apano is a nonprofit that's been advocating for Portland's Asian communities and the broader 82nd Avenue corridor. And Apano has been increasingly involved in community development. The location of this property is really right where Districts 1 and 3 meet along 82nd in the Powellhurst-Gilbert neighborhood. It's located in the J District neighborhood center, close to the intersection of 82nd and Division, so that puts it close to the FX line. And it's also very close to Portland Community College's Southeast campus, Division and 82nd. The property is currently occupied by the vacant former Canton Grill site, and it, also a lot of it is just surface parking. Current zoning is mixed-use CM2, which in this location is limited to 4 stories. Apano is interested in doing a number of things on this site, including having a mix of upper-level affordable housing and then ground-level spaces for community services and incubator commercial spaces. And they'd also like to provide a ground-level courtyard. And it can be difficult to fit all those uses in 4 stories. So the proposed zoning is to mixed-use CM3, which provides more flexibility for building height and allow them to better accommodate all those desired uses that their community visioning has really identified as important for that site. I should note that there's no change to the current mixed-use civic corridor comprehensive plan designation. The CM3 zone is one of the implementing zones along with CM2 for that comprehensive plan designation, which applies along many of our major corridors such as 82nd. This zone change is consistent with policies for accommodating higher density housing and services in neighborhood centers and along major corridors, especially that have such high levels of transit, such as near Division and 82nd. Oops. Sorry about that. I'm not sure how it went on automatic. The next couple properties I wanted to share with you, and again, I'm not going through all 19 properties, just a few select examples, but we are available if there are questions about some of the other ones. These are public agency properties where currently the zoning does not allow new housing. The first example is at Southeast 17th and Holgate. This is a property that's owned by TriMet. It's one of 2 properties along 17th that are part of the AHOP proposals. It's located in Council District 3 in the Brooklyn neighborhood. It's directly adjacent to the Max Orange line, and in fact, adjacent to a light rail station. And in the image, looks a bit different than. At any rate, there's an aerial where you can see the light rail platform on 17th, and the property is outlined in black there. It's also across from the TriMet bus garage. So this site, as you can see, is currently vacant. TriMet would like to open this site up to affordable housing development, but the current EG1 zone prohibits new housing. And this site, as well as the other TriMet-owned property, have been vacant for several years now. The site is proposed for mixed-use CM2 zoning, which would allow development that includes a mix of housing and ground floor services. Accompanying this zone change would be a change to the comprehensive plan map from mixed employment to mixed-use neighborhood. And that zone change to CM2 and mixed-use neighborhood is consistent with policies for locating mixed-use zoning close to frequent transit, especially close to light rail lines, and for locating housing close to transit and other services. The next property is what we're calling the Sears Armory site, which was the former occupant of that property. It's owned by the city of Portland. This property is located in Council District 4 in the Multnomah neighborhood. It's located along Southwest Multnomah Boulevard, which is a designated neighborhood corridor. It's close to the Multnomah Village Neighborhood Center, which is just to the west, and it's also close to services on Southwest Barber, including a nearby Safeway. It's currently the location of the Multnomah Safe Rest Village, which was authorized under Portland's Housing Emergency Ordinance. The current zoning is EG2, which is an employment zone that prohibits new residential development. Shelters such as the Safe Rest Village are a conditional use in the zone. This is a large site, over 3.5 acres. I believe it's the largest site amongst the proposed zone change sites. The proposed zone change is to mixed-use CM2 zoning, which allows a mix of services and housing. And this zoning would be accompanied by a corresponding mixed-use neighborhood comprehensive plan designation, which is an appropriate designation along neighborhood corridors and fairly low-scale mixed-use areas. And the CM2 zoning I want to highlight would achieve a few things. One is it would facilitate continuation of the Safe Rest Village in the immediate future without being dependent on renewal of the Portland Housing Emergency Ordinance or through undertaking a conditional review process as would be required in the current EG2 zone. The CM2 zone provides more flexibility for shelters than is the case with EG2. And we do want to note that safe rest villages, including the Multnomah facility, remain an important part of Portland's efforts to address unsheltered houselessness. Another objective to the zone change would to allow the option or future possibility for long-term affordable housing on the property, which is not the case now with the EG2 zoning. So there are no plans for developing affordable housing on the site, but the zone change would make it an option for the future of that property. I'd also want to highlight that the zone change has no impact on possibilities for emergency management uses on the property. Public safety uses such as emergency management facilities are allowed in both the current EG2 zone and the proposed CM2 zone. So that's a discussion that needs to happen. This zone would continue to allow those emergency management uses, but also open up options for at least part of the property to be used for other things. The CM2 zone would allow a similar scale of development to the RM2 zoning adjacent to the property, which is up to a 4-story scale. There are also requirements in the CM2 zone for a landscape buffer adjacent to lower density zones and for building height to step down in scale adjacent to those zones. The zone change to CM2 would be consistent with policies for locating a mix of uses and multi-dwelling development, including affordable housing along neighborhood corridors such as Multnomah and in and around mixed-use centers to allow more people to live close to services. And I'll be going over some of what we heard from the discussion draft later. The next example is one of our non-conforming situation examples. The example I have for you here is, let's see, let me back up just a bit. Shrunk Riverview Tower. Some of you may be familiar with this property. It really stands out in the St. John's Town Center. It's owned by Home Forward. It's located within Council District 2 in the Cathedral Park neighborhood. Existing development consists of an 11-story affordable housing building. There are no plans for redevelopment of this property. I think it mentioned, but I'm not sure, that it's owned by Home Forward. The current zone is RM2, which is usually intended for buildings 3 to 4 stories in height. So the current zoning, much smaller in scale than what the existing building already is. The proposal is to rezone this property to RM4, which is a better match with the existing scale of the building. Accompanying this zone change would be a change to the comprehensive plan map to multi-dwelling urban center, which is a designation appropriate in town centers. This zone change would facilitate the long-term continuation of the existing affordable housing building, as it would better accommodate future renovations and upgrades to the building, which could be a constrained sum when the building is already larger than allowed by zoning. The zone change is also supportive of policies for preserving existing affordable housing and for including affordable housing in locations close to services, such as in the St. John's Town Center. So those are the examples I have for you, but again, we're available for questions. some of the properties which shared are the ones that really the subject to the most community comment in the discussion draft. I wanted to briefly share the project timeline and engagement process in the next few slides. This slide is showing the project timeline. The initial phase we had for the project was back in spring to fall of 2024, where we had the project scoping and initial site identification. As Hector had mentioned, we had kicked off the project by publicizing it to Housing Oregon and its network of affordable housing organizations. As Hector mentioned, we had an information session that was an open invitation to any nonprofit or public affordable housing provider. And we also had engagement with the individual providers as follow-up. Our focus in this stage was to find out what sites housing providers might have that face constraints to providing additional housing. The focus from the get-go was on nonprofit and public agency properties. Summer to fall of 2024, we got into more detail in the site assessments and working with partners. There was further work on identifying potential sites, looking at the zoning constraints that exist and what the options might be for those properties, and working on just associating how much development or preservation might be feasible on those sites and considered whether they aligned with our affordable housing policies and other comprehensive plan policies. Moving into winter, spring of 2025, there was some initial community outreach and really refinement of the zoning code proposals. Staff worked with housing providers, which really took the lead in this, to reach out to residents of the existing properties to inform them about the project and answer any questions. We also began drafting zoning proposals for the initial set of 17 prioritized properties. And these were all properties that our housing providers said were the priority properties that they were looking at to address constraints on. Spring, summer of 2025, the big landmark or key move here was the release of the public discussion draft and associated community engagement. We released the discussion draft on June 2nd. This included the discussion draft document and maps and a map app. And we invited feedback from neighbors, community organizations, and housing advocates, which were used to refine the proposals. And I'll go into a little bit more detail as to what we heard and what we did. And then summer 2025, we released the proposed draft on August 1st and opened the map app to public testimony the same day. Moving into a little bit more about the public engagement, I'd already mentioned one of the earliest pieces was working with providers on communication with existing residents. Going into the discussion draft, we mailed over 1,400 courtesy notices to introduce the discussion draft. This went out to neighborhood associations that are affected by zone changes, as well as district coalitions. We had 2 online information sessions to be able to answer questions about the proposals and present what was being proposed. We sent out notices to neighboring property owners within 400 feet of each of the proposed zone change properties. We kept people updated through the AHOP website and news posts. And we had project subscribers amounting to about 120 people who received regular updates. We also launched the interactive map app at that time, and that's how people, along with emails, submitted their written comments. We also had staff presentations to neighborhood associations and to district coalitions. The next key community engagement piece was when we released the proposed draft on August 1st. In conjunction with that, we sent out over 1,700 additional notices to neighbors and others to announce the release of the proposed draft. And one reason why there are more notices sent out this time is that the proposed draft included 2 additional properties that were suggested or requested by Rose Community Development, which brought the number of properties to 19 instead of the earlier 17. So there's a slight increase. So what did we hear? The public comment period for the discussion draft was from June 2nd to July 8th. We received 58 written comments via the map app and email, as well as received additional feedback, and in some cases quite a bit, from public meetings. And What we had heard were a number of themes. So there was general support for expanding opportunities for affordable housing, and most proposed sites did not receive any opposition. As mentioned previously, we heard from Rose Seed Community Development for adding additional properties, which we did incorporate into the proposed draft. Only 3 sites received multiple comments. One of them was the Sears Armory site on Multnomah Boulevard. We had received 18 written comments and then more in a neighborhood meeting that were mostly opposed. And major topics raised included concerns about the Safe Rest Village and related public safety and livability issues. There was a concern about the zone change, making that Safe Rest Village permanent. And there was also community interest in the property having a role in emergency management, which the city had previously planned for the property. As I'd mentioned, emergency management continues to be an allowed use for the proposed CM2 zone. For the TriMet site on Southeast 17th, the 2 of them, that was another a set of properties that received a fair amount of comments. We received 18 comments. Most of them were supportive, and many wanted to have affordable housing possible in the area, although many highlighted the need for ground floor commercial services, which TriMet took note of in our neighborhood meeting. There were some concerns about the 4-story scale that would be allowed in the CM2 zone. I do want to highlight, though, that the CM2 zone will require building scale to step down adjacent to the single-family zoning that is adjacent to that property. The other property that received multiple comments was DeMar Downs. And this is that property just south of Division on Southeast 148th. There were concerns raised about crime and other public safety issues in the area and nearby houseless camping that commenters associated with the existing affordable housing complex. Some of that camping was happening on that adjacent vacant field that is owned by Parks. And we did talk to Home Forward about that property, which they manage. And those concerns about public safety and issue and nearby camping were of concern to the residents of the property and to the management of the property. And those will need to be addressed as issues regardless of whether the zone change happens. The proposal is to allow more homes on this property, and the addition of homes is part of Portland's solution to the houselessness that neighbors are concerned about in the surrounding area. So I just wanted to circle back to what Patricia had shared in terms of the staff proposal. It's fairly simple. It's asking that Planning Commission recommend that City Council adopt the Affordable Housing Opportunities Report and amend the comprehensive plan map and zoning map as applicable on 19 properties that are outlined in the report to support the development and preservation of affordable housing. So no changes to the zoning code, just to the zoning map for specific properties or a comprehensive plan map. So that's our presentation. This concludes our presentation. We're available for any clarifying questions commissioners might have before moving on to the rest of the agenda.
Thank you both very much. And sorry that Rachel couldn't join us today. Does anyone have any questions for clarification or information, recognizing that after the hearing, we will have a lot more time for discussion, and I would be quite disappointed if we didn't, but I think we'll have plenty to talk about. Commissioner Ames.
Yeah, Commissioner Ames, for the record, on I think one of the first slides, it said that we have a deficiency of 34,000 affordable units in the city of Portland. Is that regulated affordable units, or is that just a deficiency of 34,000 units of any type?
My understanding and talking to the people who've been working on the housing production strategy from which that number came was that it's looking at cost-burdened households and the numbers of units that would be needed that are affordable to move people out of the cost-burdened or houseless situation.
Commissioners, Patricia Diefendorfer for the record. I'll only add that that number is the number of households that are needed for households that have incomes of 0 to 80% of area median income.
Thanks.
Vice Chair O'Meara, did you have something? Okay. Commissioner Knowles.
So this is more of a process question. I have a few questions I want to ask of the staff, mostly related to process of how we got here. But these don't have to come now, they can come later.
Yeah.
I'm happy to do that during discussion. I just don't know what the usual,
Yeah, well,
procedure
after,
is.
oh, that's a great question. So after the hearing, we will beg staff to come back up to answer all of our questions.
okay. All right, perfect,
Great.
thanks.
No, thank you. Any others? Okay, thank you both very much, and we will open the public hearing. And if, we'll take it up, the first two are in person, and the second, so I'll say who the first two are and who's on deck. So you know to prepare and hydrate. So first, a couple, Leigh Armstrong and Julie Livingston, and then on deck, online, Guy Ben, and forgive me if I mispronounce your names, my apologies, please correct me, Ashley Ploche. And you will each have 3 minutes, and I'll, at 30 seconds, do something rude, but still safe for work.
Does it work? All right.
Yes, well done.
Hi, everybody. My name is Leigh Armstrong, and I'm here on behalf of Habitat for Humanity Portland region. We're here to support the Affordable Housing Opportunities Project. We, as Bill explained, we own one of the properties proposed for rezoning on Northeast Prescott Street, where we plan to build 16 family-sized homes starting in 2026. Rezoning that property is going to make it significantly less expensive for us to development, and then we get to pass these savings on to future home buyers by delivering homes that are affordable for households who are priced out of the private market. Portlanders who perform essential jobs in our communities can't afford to live here. Families are leaving Portland in search of affordable housing. Communities of color continue to face displacement. Habitat homes bring us one step closer to addressing these challenges. 77% of Habitat home buyers in the Portland region have no children. Have children. That was a very bad mistake. 69% of our home buyers are people of color, and most Habitat home buyers have incomes below 80% of the AMI. Many have incomes between 35 and 60%. Habitat is building across the metro region. Often we are taking a property that is vacant and problematic and transforming it into a thriving community. That's an opportunity for new homeowners, and it's a benefit to the existing neighbors. Thank you for your consideration and your service to the City of Portland.
My eyesight is so bad I can't see if the light is on or not, but I think I'm
Got it.
okay. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Thank you for hearing testimony today on the Affordable Housing Opportunities Project. My name is Julie Livingston, and I work in the Real Estate Development Department of Home Forward, the Housing Authority of Multnomah County. So 11 of the 19 properties that are included in AHOP are owned by Home Forward or by a tax credit partnership for which Home Forward serves as the general partner. So for all intents and purposes, Home Forward. Of the 11 properties, 6 have been out of conformance with the zoning code for decades because their scale has always exceeded whatever zoning has been in effect. At these properties, capital improvement projects designed to improve circumstances for residents have spent time and money on land use reviews that have achieved little more than an acknowledgement that the property is non-conforming. So Home Forward is just very pleased to have these properties included in AHOP because it means future renovation projects will have an easier time securing entitlements. And that means better maintenance of the property, better amenities for residents, and better buildings in our neighborhoods. So of the 5 remaining properties, 3 are proposed to shift from a residential zone to a commercial zone. And Home Forward sees this change as significant because it allows our resident services staff and our community partners to deliver services on site to neighbors as well as residents. Now properties will be able to host a neighborhood association meeting where in the past they have not been able to. Or they may be able to provide food pantry services on site for people who live around the area and not just specifically at the property. This type of increased access to a site builds relationships and can reduce the isolation and stigma experienced by some residents of affordable housing. So the proposed zoning will increase the capacity at all 11 sites, but currently none of these sites are in Home Forward's development pipeline. So this is a really long look towards the future and what the future might be at Home Forward. Of the 11 buildings, 11 properties, several are very recently renovated. And of the 11, none are currently exhibiting the types of capital needs that merit redevelopment. There are no failing underground utilities, like the big stuff that causes Home Forward to take a serious look at redevelopment. These properties are safe and secure housing for 660 households, and Home Forward has no plans to relocate any of those households as a result of AHOP. So thank you very much, and thank you to staff, to Hector and Bill and Rachel, who have done such a great job working with the affordable housing community on this project.
Thank you, and whoops, sorry, and thank you also, Julie, for your past work on the Design Commission and as chair, so I appreciate it. What?
I miss it.
Oh, yeah, I can appreciate that. Next up online, we'll have Guy Ben and Ashley Polosh, and on deck, Carl Reistadt and David Carney Fenton. Guy, can we hear you? We cannot hear you, but we see.
Chair Ralph, I think Guy Ben is on the phone. Oh, he's online? Oh, pardon me. Okay. I thought we had a note that he was going to be on the phone. Perfect.
Yeah, it's online. Guy, let's come back to you. Ashley, can we hear you? I'm sorry, Guy. I think Zoom is picking you up, or for some reason we are not hearing you. And same with Ashley.
Chair Ralph, I was just going to offer that, we didn't have anyone, any of the commissioners joining virtually, so we didn't really have an opportunity to do a sound check to make sure that the folks that are online can both hear us and we can be heard, or we can hear them. So I'm not sure. Yeah, if Mr. Guy Ben could try once more, so we can check on that. Seems he's unmuted, yeah.
Oh, gosh.
Okay.
Okay. I'm curious if we could connect with our Open Signal friends and
Maybe we
go
could
to
take the
the
folks
next two, and then hopefully we'll have things remedied. Guy and Ashley, I'm very sorry, and thank you for holding out with us. We're going to try in a few minutes. Okay. Yes, Curtis Reistadt? Is there a Curtis in the house? Okay. Lisa? Yeah, David and Lisa? Great, okay. You choose.
Is it on?
Yes,
Yeah.
now it is.
Thank you for allowing me to provide testimony this evening. My name is David Carney Fenton, and I'm an adjacent neighbor to the former Sears Armory site and current site of the Multnomah Safe Rest Village. I live on the south side of Multnomah Boulevard, directly across from the site. My wife and I have lived there for over 34 years, and we raised our only son there. He's 28 now. I'm opposed to the zoning change to this site for two reasons: the need for a West Side emergency management staging site and to preclude the potential for any expansion of shelter units or pods at the Safe Rest Village. I assume you know that this site was originally a quitclaim deeded to the city in 2012 with a restriction. that the property only be used for the purpose of emergency management related services. The property was since purchased by the city to remove this restriction. My concern is if the rezoning as proposed occurs, the city will continue to neglect the need for an emergency management operations site on the west side of the Willamette River. There are over 150,000 people living on the west side who will someday be glad they had the resources and services available to respond during and after an emergency, a disaster, calamity, or crisis of some kind. The rezoning of the Sears site should only be considered if and when an alternative for this public service has been identified and secured. There is no reason to change the zoning now if this is ultimately the best site for the operations center. Secondly, I think it's fair to say we all agree that there should be more affordable housing in our community and more shelter units for people living without. The Multnomah Safe Rest Village was expanded last summer from 30 to 100 shelter units. However, adjacent neighbors, the Multnomah Neighborhood Association and Community Action Committee have been working with the city and site operators to find agreeable solutions to unresolved issues with only marginal success. Poorly designed lighting, noise, and the draw of additional unhoused non-residents to the perimeter of the fenced village impact nearby residents with crime, litter, confrontations, and assaults. The proposed AHOP rezoning would potentially allow for more shelter units or pods at the Multnomah Safe Rest Village, making the site even more challenging to manage, increasing the negative impacts to the adjacent neighbors and the entire Multnomah Village neighborhood community. For these reasons, I ask that no zoning change take place at this time at this specific site. Thank you.
Is it on?
It is now.
Hi, my name's Lisa Carney Fenton. I've lived across the street from the Sears Armory property for 34 years. Thank you all for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight. I oppose the BPS AHOP zoning change to the Sears site that is part of the PPS bundle for the proposed affordable housing projects in Portland. While I'm not opposed to affordable housing, I am opposed to how the city has proceeded with the selection of the Sears site for rezoning. First, the city's mailing of a nondescript postcard that a property near you is being considered for affordable housing provided no details. Most neighbors discarded the card. No details in the card because the city knew there would be major pushback. The city wants to change the zoning under the pretense that it's for affordable housing. That is very misleading. Portland Solutions wants to expand the Multnomah Safe Rest Village. If the city wants to place affordable housing on the site, they can rezone the Sears site to R7 or RM2. RM2 zoning will allow for the development of affordable housing, which is what the city stated was their primary objective for the zoning change. The proposed CM2 zoning is inappropriate for the Sears site. CM2 zoning belongs further to the west, closer to the village, or further east toward Barber Boulevard. Secondly, I attended the AHOP information session on June 18th. It was evident from my follow-up questions that BPS and Portland Solutions have not been transparent with the Multnomah Safe Rest Village neighbors and are apparently working together behind the scenes to push through the zoning change. I learned at that meeting that BPS has been in communication with the staff of Portland Solutions since 2022. Neighbors who volunteer to problem solve all the issues inside and outside the Safe Rest Village and who meet monthly with Portland Solutions as part of a community advisory committee, of which I am on, were never informed of the Portland Solutions plans, the backdoor dealings, or the communications with BPS regarding a zone change at the Sears site. We suspect this is because Portland Solutions hopes to expand the Safe Rest Village. They need to keep the neighbors in the dark because adjacent neighbors have had so many problems with the current Safe Rest Village configuration. The expansion is not supported. The current perimeter and on-site problems are ongoing, have destroyed our once clean and safe neighborhood. I'm requesting that you either, one, keep the Sears site zoned as it currently is so that the West Side Emergency Management Center can be placed there, or two, remove the Sears site from your grouping of sites for AHOP project. My father was a land developer for over 30 years in Southwest Portland. He was required to present to neighbors and neighborhood associations and work with the surrounding community before developing any of his projects. That is what should be done at the Sears site. That is what is fair and the right thing to do. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you both.
Commissioner
I
Routh,
think
I think we
we-
can give another try for the online folks.
Guy, Ashley, I'll try it.
Sure, this is Ashley. Can you hear Guy?
Good evening.
Can we pump
Guy
up the
speaking. Can you hear me?
volume? I feel like I'm Christian Bale. We almost got it.
Yeah, good evening, commissioners. Can you hear me?
Yes!
Great. Good evening. Sorry I can't be there to attend in person, but I would like to say that TriMet is pleased to support the proposed draft of the city's Affordable Housing Opportunities Project. TriMet is committed to making the region one of the world's most inclusive, sustainable, and livable places, and transit-oriented development is central to this goal. TOD helps communities manage new growth by increasing transit ridership and creating mixed-use and mixed-income communities that provide better access to jobs, civic resources, and daily needs. This, in turn, supports long-term economic prosperity. The AHOP effort is an important blueprint to unlock these publicly owned sites for affordable housing production. It's a key step towards ensuring that housing is built adjacent to our reliable and affordable transportation options. TriMet and the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability staff have been in close coordination to rezone these two impactful sites on Southeast 17th in the Brooklyn neighborhood. Originally acquired as part of the Portland-Milwaukee Light Rail project, the Orange Line, these vacant parcels have been locked with unsupportive zoning for approximately 10 years now. We would like to see them available under a change from EG1 to CM2 so that they can be developed for affordable housing that can support the neighborhood and additional transit-oriented development. TriMet appreciates the city's support in rezoning these sites that will allow this vision to become a reality. Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony today, and we're grateful for the city's leadership in developing this AHOP effort and its continued partnership with TriMet. Thank you very much.
And Ashley, can we hear you?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Appreciate your all's time, commissioners, Bill and Hector and the folks at TriMet. I know we've had conversations and appreciate your engagement with the Brooklyn community. I wanted to provide comment in support of having this mixed use purpose and in recognition of the need for increased housing supply, especially near transit corridors. However, I would encourage the commission to consider modifying the proposed zones for the 17th Avenue locations from CM2 to CM1. And there's a few different reasons for that. Number one, as Bill had noted, CM2 does allow zonings up to 4 stories tall, but with bonus provisions like affordable housing that can actually go up to 5 stories tall. And while I really love the idea of, creating accessible housing for a variety of people, a 4 or 5 story building is significantly out of scale with our surrounding areas where the predominant structure and height is just 1 or 2 stories. And if you were to look at the homes on 16th near where I live, these are very modest 1 and 2 story residences that I think a CM2 scale development visually and physically towers over the homes, even if there is some sort of a scale down area right next to the home, right next to that lot. But it alters the character and cohesion of this established residential street, whereas CM1 zoning could have that, added bonus provision. Instead of going from 3 stories normal, it would be 4 stories with that bonus. So it still kind of fits within that original idea of 4 stories max, which is still twice the height of the surrounding community residences, but it allows for meaningful development while maintaining that contextual consistency. And the other reason why I think it would be helpful for ZM1 zoning instead is that we have parking issues with a lot of increased residential people who would be staying in these places. So obviously more residences or more commercial patrons or more vehicles. If you were to look, 16th Avenue is very limited with its on-street parking near Holgate, and it's already constrained in terms of accessibility. It's constantly parked up all the way. There isn't a way for people to park on 17th to access this space, so they would be leveraging that residential street right there. So I think it's just something that we should be mindful of with parking aspects that are related to that zoning and design changes. And then lastly, I really think that CM1 is aligned with the site context and the city's goals because it is opening to that residential street. And even though it is near the max transit corridor, I think CM1 still serves areas like this. It's a mixed use nodes adjacent to lower density residential areas at the edges of centers. And it has that mix that everybody has been talking about with residential and commercial uses. But really the big thing that we want to convey, and I've spoken to several neighbors who are unable to be at the hearing today, many of us are concerned and think that rezoning to CM1 instead of CM2 could still meet the city's housing goals while also protecting the neighborhood livability and supporting scale appropriate infill and unnecessary conflict over out of scale development. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. I didn't realize that that was our Academy music. Next up is Mark Booth, and then James Peterson, and then on deck, Josh Hetrick and Kristen Beadle, and then after that, if I don't see Jonathan Greenwood online, but if we can conjure him. Mark? Thank you.
Oh, tap it? Oh. Okay.
It's a bit of hazing.
Members of the Planning Commission, thank you for your time. My name is Mark Booth. I've lived 2 blocks from the Sears Armory for about 25 years. No one can dispute the need for additional affordable housing or additional housing in general in Portland. The AHOP project goal is to take sites throughout Portland and rezone them to reduce obstacles to higher density housing on those sites. This legislative procedure eases the task for city planning staff and others. For the Sears Armory site in Southwest Portland, convenience has been prioritized by the city of Portland over planning. This site's zoning should be evaluated on its own merit, at least through a Type 2 review. The Armory site should not be included in the AHOP proposal. The Sears Armory site has a checkered history of land use by the city of Portland. At the turn of the century, the city recognized the potential for a significant disaster such as a major earthquake and the need to respond. The federal government provided the opportunity to acquire the Armory site so long as it was used as an emergency management center as defined by FEMA. The city accepted. It would be the only such facility on the west side of the Willamette River. The feds deeded the site to Portland with that restriction. In 2014, the city went through land use review and the site was rezoned to its current EG2. However, political will often manifests what is popular instead of what is well thought out. The Armory was the site of an overnight shelter in 2015 to 2016. The federal government found out about it and rebuked Portland for violating its deed restriction. Then Mayor Hales closed the shelter and promised the city would stand up the emergency management facility. In 2022, the Armory site provided an opportunity for Dan Ryan to say he was ending homelessness. He established his first Safe Rest Village, or SRV, claiming the feds and to neighbors that it was temporary. Again, the feds challenged Portland for its violation of the restriction. This time, however, the city was able to purchase away the deed restriction using ARPA funds in 2023. But please note, the zone change to EG2 had only been 9 years earlier. Unsurprisingly, the city gave no thought to the SRV's off-site impacts, both environmental and human, endured by the adjacent residents, school, and by nearby businesses. This SRV has grown from 30 occupants to 100. The city says plans are to have no more than 120 occupants to us. Off-site impacts grow with these increases in population. However, the city is dismissive of the damage it's imposed on the neighborhood. The rezoning to CM2 proposed allows for expansions to the shelter functions without conditional use reviews. Continued reflexive changes without having to consider the impacts harms the character of the neighborhood. The proposed rezoning is couched in the emotional pitch of affordable. As a practical matter, should there ever be any type of housing project for the site, the SRV and its participants would need to be displaced. It seems disingenuous to include Sears Armory and AHOP. And the west side of Portland is still unserved by an emergency management facility. Thanks for your time. And the music.
And, and do we also have what is left? Do you did written testimony as well, correct?
I did.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, James.
That's working. Hello? Great. Hi, my name is James Peterson. I own a woodworking business across the street from this armory. I'd like to request that the record be left open so the neighborhood could respond to the testimony and the staff comments that have been made today. I'm opposing the zone change on the Sears property from EG2 to CM2 in the AHOP project. The Sears property was changed to EG2 for the West Side Emergency Response Center. I was able to get the city council to place a 45-foot height limit at the time of the zone change. It should be noted that there was supposed to be there was a concept of having a West Side fuel station there, large trucks. All these things are inconsistent with a CM2 zone. You're not allowed to have commercial vehicles in a commercial zone, as I'm sure you're quite aware with. I'm unclear why the staff thinks it would be all right to have an emergency response center in a CM2 zone. Both the Multnomah Neighborhood Association and Sweeney endorsed the property as being used for the West Side Emergency Response Center. The Sears property is the only property in Southwest Portland suitable for the West Side Emergency Response Center. Changing the zones from EG2 to CM2 would be inconsistent with policy 8.104 and 8.105 of the 2035 Comprehensive Plan. Allowing housing on this property with this zone change to CM2 would interfere with these policies and provide the planning for adequate facility for emergency response center. The Safe Rest Village was placed on the Sears property under the city declared emergency, bypassing the zoning and development code since it was classified as a temporary use. The APOP implies that this zone change to CM2 would facilitate the continuing use of this property. The neighborhood was told that the life of the Safe Rest Village would be 3 years. The Safe Rest Village are temporary facilities, not long-term permanent facilities, as the draft AHOP implies. The Multnomah Neighborhood Association has not endorsed the Safe Rest Village on the Sears property. The city paid $3 million to remove the deed restriction that prevented the Safe Rest Village from being placed on the site. The 2535 Comprehensive Plan without the middle housing policy has adequate housing capacity of all housing types for the next 20 years. The 2045 City of Portland Housing Analysis Report and the 23 residential buildable lands inventory shows that the city plan has 97, needs roughly 100,000 housing units, and there's twice that capacity.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, because I don't believe that Jonathan is here, Josh Hetrick and Kristen Beadle. You're here? Okay. Great. Thank you both.
Hello? There. Okay. Hi, I'm Josh Hetrick. I live in the Brooklyn neighborhood. I'm a member of the Brooklyn Land Use and Transportation Committee, but I'm just speaking on my own behalf today. I'm broadly supportive of the whole AHOP effort. I think it's great that there's been proactive collaboration between agencies and bureaus and organizations. The accelerated pace is also welcome, although I wish that we could speed it up a little more even, given the nature of the housing crisis. And especially when changes are relatively minimal to certain properties or like backfilling existing, kind of legalizing existing conditions. I hope we can continue to find ways to make those things happen even more quickly. But so I live in Brooklyn and I live near both of the properties on 17th Ave, and I re-support zoning both of them to the proposed CM2. The house height and massing allowances for those under the new zoning will be similar to what they were under the old one. So were any development to happen there at all under existing rules by right, they would be fairly similar to what would come under this project as well. But I think that the uses would be much more beneficial We're already very over-indexed on industrial properties in the neighborhood with the Brooklyn Yard, the TriMet Garage, PGE. So having mixed use for residential and commercial would be certainly helpful. Something more active, because both of those lots tend to draw nuisances like unswept leaves and snow and trash and things like that, that just, so getting development there would really help sort of improve the quality of that overall. And I think having more affordability in the neighborhood would be amazing, because part of the reason that I live in Brooklyn was part of the natural affordability based on the variety of housing types available. So explicitly providing more affordable options is would be very beneficial. And we explicitly also need more commercial spaces, especially along 17th Ave, especially near the Max. The 17th and Holgate in particular is a very strong candidate for mixed use and commercial. It sort of anchors a node right next to the Max station, and going south, there's actually a number of properties down there. There's some different businesses in the Iron Fireman building, but they're kind of hard. They're a little bit invisible. So having something that sort of establishes it as a more cohesive corridor would really help to sort of clue people in that there are businesses and things there. And we also have a bit of an economic imbalance with our surrounding neighborhoods, because we in the neighborhood tend to have to go out of the neighborhood to get a lot of things, but we don't get the same benefit in reverse. So having more reasons to draw people from surrounding neighborhoods in and through mixed uses, in addition to things that are beneficial for residents and visitors alike. And lastly, I'll just note that there's a plan from 2012 called Imagine Holgate that was produced, I believe, through PSU. It talks a lot about the potentials of opportunities for the Holgate site, specifically as something other than just a high-speed conduit for vehicles. And so that's something that we should really look at for that property as it gets developed. So, thank you.
Hello. Hi, my name is Kristen Beadle, and I'm a resident of the Brooklyn neighborhood. I've been there for over 20 years. My home is on a corner directly behind the property at 3717 Southeast 17th, so not the one at Holgate, but the one further up on 17th. And I have some concerns about changing the zoning to allow a 3 to 4, and now I heard today up to 5-story multi-unit property right behind my property, my home. The concerns are in a couple different areas. First being traffic and parking. The idea of adding a 3 to 4-story building with 30 to 40 units, upwards of 80 residents, with no requirement, which is what TriMet told us. It was not a requirement to add additional parking. For on-site parking just feels really out of step. You can't park on Southeast 17th. It's a one-way that is directly adjacent to the light rail, which means the residents will park in the neighborhood. It's said before. Currently, TriMet employees that work at the operations headquarters and the garage there already have to park in the neighborhood. We're talking about bus drivers and folks that work for TriMet. They don't have enough parking for themselves, so they already come into the neighborhood to park. The other kind of areas that are of concern for me are the scale, privacy, and noise considerations. A 3 to 4-story building with residence windows overlooking myself and my neighbors' backyards and bedroom is unnerving to me. I've seen it kind of how that works when it butts right up next to older homes, single-story homes, and it's not very nice. It's not very pretty for those folks. My neighbors and I will lose our privacy, the peace and quiet. I know it's a transportation corridor, but actually it's not loud there now. And not to mention just the sunlight. We're facing southern exposure, and that will be gone. So I think about like what's worked in that space prior to light rail going in. That property worked really well. It was a credit union, so it served as a valuable employer and neighborhood service. The scale of the building was single story with a brick facade, so it kept in alignment with the residential neighborhood feel. The business had weekday hours and Saturday morning hours, again, making it feel like a good fit for the neighborhood. It didn't pose any additional issues with parking. So a scale and size of that type of business works for the Southeast area, 17th area, and the surrounding neighborhood streets. Currently, Brooklyn has many new, recent, large-scale apartment/condo buildings along Southeast Milwaukee and a bit north on Southeast 17th, and they're not at capacity. So they're not getting filled up. And we've lost 2 banks and a small grocery. So we do need something, but it needs to feel and fit in the space where residents are living. So I ask that you please keep the current zoning and work.
Thank you both.
I hope you feel like celebrities just for a moment. And now the last, Lisa Maddox, supposed to be on online, but I do not see. And okay, Will Fuller, I see you online. Can we hear you?
Hello,
Yes,
this is Will Fuller. Can you hear me?
we can.
Hello?
It's a revelation.
Okay, my name is Will Fuller. I'm a board member of the Multnomah Neighborhood Association, and I'm its equity chair. Now, you're hearing a lot of testimony tonight, so I'll be brief. I'm here to emphasize the association's request to remove the Sears Armory from AHOP until we're reassured that the site's zone will permit the West Side Emergency Staging Facility, which was originally planned for the site, to be built. Don't let the current crisis in housing interfere with the future crises like the big one or other natural disasters. The reasons are in the written testimony provided by our president, Diane Parrish, so I won't dwell on that further. But I'm also here to remind us that we're dealing with crises where there are no ideal solutions and maybe no good ones. We must do our best with the reality before us and use the talents and passions of each other to collaborate across our differences to find the most effective solutions we can devise in the spirit of the Good Neighbor Agreement for the Multnomah Safe Rest Village. And finally, as Equity Chair, I am charged with promoting an open, fair, welcoming, and safe neighborhood for all. And that will take all of us working together to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Will. Please consider narrating audiobooks. Okay. Thank you. And with that, we will, not seeing anyone else who is here to testify, we will close the oral record. We will, forgive me, I'm sorry, be closing the written record as well, but recognizing that this is not the public's last bite of the apple in terms of engagement with City Council. And with that, I would love to invite, did I miss anything? It's the first this evening. I'm just going to revel in that for a moment. Could we invite staff back up? Please, thank you very much. And thank you again to everyone who testified. And if, and just while we're here, this is being live streamed. It is also available as a recording on YouTube after the fact. So I'd welcome questions, thoughts. Commissioner Knowles?
Yes, thank you. David Knowles for the record. So I just wanted to have a little bit of a discussion with staff. It may involve a couple of questions, if that's okay. So can you talk a little bit about how you would, if an individual wanted to go through a zone change, what does that process look like? It's a quasi-judicial process, right?
Yes.
Can you just talk a little bit about how, if it was a single property, what would be involved in that?
Yes, it'd be a quasi-judicial process, individually processed. There would be all the costs associated with the land use review procedure, such as that. And there are a number of things that indicate which is the hearing body in many cases, including, I think, with the Multnomah Sears zone change that happened a while back. It was a hearings officer decision that okayed essentially the zone change. But the key difference is the fact that if we're looking at affordable housing, batching them together relieves the housing provider of the greater cost involved with the quasi-judicial procedures, as well as some of the uncertainty that would be associated with each of, say, the 19 separate quasi-judicial zone
No,
changes.
I understand that. And what are the criteria that typically get applied in a quasi-judicial zone change process?
The criteria include a number of things. Amongst them are infrastructure adequacy, the intent, impacts in the surrounding area, the intent of the zone, or does it match the comprehensive plan designation for the area. There are a number of things, and it is very specific to the site in terms of the considerations.
So for each of these sites, did you use similar kinds of criteria?
We, for example, had shared the proposals for zone changes with infrastructure bureaus, and they reviewed them, and the intent was for them to flag locations where they had concerns about the infrastructure capacity, and they did not have concerns for these properties. They're all in locations that had sidewalks, that were on major infrastructure or transportation routes. So we didn't hear concerns about that. We also looked at policies, policies indicating where certain zones are appropriate. And the properties we ended up focusing on were all properties that were adjacent to neighborhood or civic corridors, streets that are intended by the comprehensive plan to be places where you accommodate higher density housing and services, or they were in or adjacent to centers. So there's definitely a locational consideration that was related to comprehensive plan policies. So that was a big part of it.
And I think I read that you provided the same level of notice to neighbors that you would provide on a quasi-judicial proceeding.
Yes, that 400-foot distance notifications is not required for legislative projects, but we did want to be fair to people because of the local impacts and let them then know that there are changes proposed near them.
So has the Bureau or the Planning Commission done one of these sort of one project, multiple property zone changes in the past?
Yes, Hector had mentioned that we had a previous pair of projects, what was the affordable housing, EOAH.
Expanding opportunities for affordable housing.
Which focused on properties that are owned by faith-based organizations. So those are often properties that were larger than typical in neighborhood areas, and that similarly batched those zone changes together to really prioritize affordable housing as outcomes.
Okay. So I guess, and I'm supportive of the overall project. I have some questions about some of those specific properties. But I guess my concern is that it feels like this could be a slippery slope sometime. So what happens if a private developer private owner comes along who owns numerous properties all over the east side, for example, and there are several of those? What is to prevent them from seeking the same sort of legislative solution instead of going through the quasi-judicial process and all of the fees and scrutiny that is involved with that?
Commissioner Knowles, I'll try to address that question. As you can see from the past projects that we noted in this presentation and this project, these efforts, when the city has taken, when the Bureau and the city has taken on these legislative projects for individual sites, it's been sites that are where the opportunity is for affordable housing, essentially 100% affordable housing. And when the sites are owned by, in the previous iterations, faith-based organizations, in this iteration, nonprofit affordable housing developers and publicly owned sites. So these groups are, folks who either for financial reasons or in the case of the faith-based organizations, they're not typically developers. They don't have the capacity necessarily or the expertise to go through the land use process. So these projects have been very targeted to facilitate affordable housing and to provide that support and assistance to, entities that either need the support or where the financial assistance is beneficial.
Okay, thank you.
And actually, we did have a property, if I may. We did have a property from the, and I don't know the acronym either, so I just say it as fast as I can, Expanding Opportunities for Affordable Housing. There was a privately held property that did come before us that had, deeply affordable housing and had for a long period of time. And so we deliberated on that and with the idea that while they were not a nonprofit, it was still within the spirit of deeply affordable housing. That ended up not going forward because council in particular wanted to obviate that slippery slope that you were just asking about.
Okay, thank you.
Others?
So I'll have some questions about some of the specific properties, but I'll wait until we get to that.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Ames.
I also have a question about a specific property. Can I ask that now? Is that, yeah. Just curious what Brian Ames for the record. What is the city's current plan for the Sears Armory site? Is it Safe Rest Village in perpetuity? How does we heard about the emergency management facility. Just kind of curious what the current plan is.
The current plan is to have the Safe Rest Village in the short term, in the midterm, and to, again, as staff has mentioned, this zone change just creates the opportunity for the affordable housing. The city has no specific plans at this time for the site beyond the current existing Safe Rest Village. So that's really it. This is just, because it's a city-owned site, because it's a publicly owned site, rezoning it creates an opportunity, but there's no concrete plans at this time. And I think I don't know if we mentioned that we have a person in the audience, Brandy Westerman, who is a staff person with Portland Solutions. So if the commission has any questions about the site and activities that are happening at the site, we do have someone available to answer those questions. Thank you.
Mr. Brannon.
Can you hear me? Yes. All right. Teresha Brannon for the record. Many of the concerns were about that West Side Emergency Center. By changing this code, does this mean that that is no longer feasible?
As staff mentioned, and I'll just say this very quickly, the change in zoning does not change the feasibility of that. As Bill mentioned, that zone does permit those types of uses, so it doesn't foreclose that opportunity in the future if that is an option. I do know from coordination with our facilities bureau that there are no plans and there's no funding for such a use currently.
Yeah, a couple of questions. The first is a clarifying, Mary Irene O'Mara, Vice Chair O'Mara for the record, clarifying question on the non-conforming use. And the Home Forward rep provided a great example of having to go through additional approval processes for upgrades. So I'm just trying to understand the scale of that. Do we have a sense through this project, were there other affordable housing providers that came forward that currently have non-conforming use and were not accepted, or else has there been city research into sort of how often is that occurring? Because that's a big burden to a housing provider to have to go through additional land use process just to be a good landlord and keep buildings habitable. So do we have a sense of the scale of that non-conforming use for affordable housing through the city?
Commissioner O'Mara, the approach we had was really, it was not city staff going out and assessing whether or not existing affordable housing is out of scale with the zone. It was really left to the initiative of affordable housing providers. So it was an open call. One thing I should note that is that a lot of the properties where you have the non-conforming situation, where some of these larger scale steel and concrete towers from the 60s and 70s, and frankly, Home Forward is the owner of most of those properties. A lot of other affordable housing development is more in the 2 to 4 story scale, which tends to be more in keeping with the zoning that applies. It was really much more that more limited number of 1960s, 70s towers that were out of scale with the current zoning that applies.
Okay, thank you so much. And then specific to the 3-acre Sears site, if the intention is to open up opportunity for affordable housing on that site, one could assume that would go through additional public process. For example, PHB could issue a NOFA for developers. And those developers would then go through additional public process in terms of proposing a vision, engaging with the neighborhood. There is still the opportunity to incorporate some of the neighborhood's desired uses. I think for a 3-acre site, it makes sense to me why we're looking at a zoning change, but I also want to acknowledge if it is a public process, there will be future opportunities for engagement, and that process would evolve in terms of the vision for the site. Is that a correct assumption around how that might play out if that was offered by PHB, for example?
Yes, my understanding is most of our affordable housing providers, especially on large sites, would have a process that involves the community. And currently, as I said, housing is not even an option in the current zoning. So if there's going to be community engagement as to what is the future of this property, currently housing is not part of even the range of possibilities for the property. This, as I said, it indicated that emergency management uses, which are public safety uses, are allowed in the CM2 zone, so that it would not preclude the ability to choose to develop that concept further, but housing would also become within the realm of possibility.
Thank you so much.
Great. Other questions? I'm looking especially to Commissioners Alvarado and Spivak, since you have not spoken. Yeah, Commissioner Spivak, please.
I don't have lots of questions. I would just start off with a little bit of a bomb here. Is that I noticed that TriMet has proposed, or the city has proposed public lands at the Rhine Station and Holgate Station, which I think are great ideas. Because I think when you put a light rail station in, you're indicating a plan to have denser uses around it. I am still missing the opportunity to see a project where we propose the next station stop, the Bybee stop, which has over 150 acres of golf course around that station stop. That seems like an opportunity to do some affordable housing on part of that land. Publicly owned also, could have been part of this project. So I'll put that little flag. I just learned a couple weeks ago in California, they passed a law that statewide, every jurisdiction has to allow a faith-based community to build housing on their property statewide through a by right process, at least a story higher than the stuff around it that's zoned. That's not true in Oregon. I'm not proposing an amendment to do that, but thinking back to the last project we did with faith-based projects, many of the sites in this project are in commercial corridors, and I love the idea of mixed-use development on those areas. But if you look around the city, as I sometimes do, the larger sites, acre and a half, in residential, nice neighborhoods like that, where they're very walkable, tend to be owned by faith communities and schools. I appreciate that the last project gave a chance for some of those to be zoned for redevelopment. But there's a challenge there, because even if you do that, if you have one of those sites, it's a challenge to develop the site, because you have to go through a type 3 process, zone change, comp plan, just like we talked about, which is intimidating, or you have to wait around for a next project like this. So I would may ask the city to consider doing a process where you can do something by right on those larger sites, which are being sold regularly right now. I mean, LDS Church has sold 2 large properties, each one over an acre. There are more coming down the pipeline, and those are great opportunities at a different sort of location where this kind of housing would be welcome, I think. And I think that, so I guess I don't have questions for you. I'm just sharing some comments. I generally support the proposals in this project. You know, it was helpful sort of hearing, especially in the light rail we have a difference of a perspective in the neighborhood. I'm going to sort of go with what's being proposed by staff because I think at 5 stories is totally appropriate near light rail stops. But I also appreciate the people who came in to think that that's too large for what they were expecting in that area. I'll leave it at that.
Commissioner Alvarado, did you have something?
I'm just curious about future selection of properties and how that process opens up and what I know there have been previous iterations of these kind of selection of projects and just how I'm more curious about that process and what it would mean to add or in this case take away specific sites. More of a process question.
Commissioners, I'll start out. Maybe I'll ask Bill to elaborate. I think at this time, we aren't necessarily conceiving of another project in the near term. As we noted, we did 2 projects in 2020 and then 2021. And I think I understand from staff, I was not here at the time, but I think the 2021 project was resulted from the fact that more people found out about the 2020 project and wanted, to have their sites considered. And so we, as a bureau, initiated another process to do that. If more sites come to our attention, that might be something we look to do in the future. I think at this point, we did a pretty comprehensive call. I feel like we, with these 19 sites dispersed around the city, representing, different nonprofit providers and public sites, that we did a pretty good sift of sites that are available right now. And, the housing production strategy has 35 actions, and this was one of 35. So in a sense, we're, crossing that off the list with this process, and that'll enable us to move forward with the many other projects that are in the pipeline, such as the Inner East rezoning project that we talked about. I think, was it last meeting, we did the briefing on the infrastructure analysis that we did in anticipation of a project where we look at some opportunities for multi-dwelling and mixed-use zoning in the Inner East area. So we would like to, proceed with those projects.
Thank you. We'll go back to Commissioner Knowles with your specifics. Yeah.
Thank you. Specifically on the Sears site, it's owned by the city of Portland, but that includes a lot of agencies and people. So who exactly at the city of Portland is responsible for it?
My understanding, it's Fleet and Facilities that has jurisdiction, or they have that in their portfolio.
Fleet and Facilities.
Bureau of Fleet and Facilities, I believe, with the reorganization of the city government, that's a Bureau of Fleet and Facilities. Okay. And they are the owners of the site.
Oh, okay. Did they come and ask for this rezoning?
They did not. This process of identifying the Sears site was in coordination with our various bureaus, Housing Bureau, Portland Solutions, and the Bureau of Fleet and Facilities, to determine that, in fact, the various city bureaus and entities felt like this was a good time to initiate a change on this site.
So who's responsible for managing whatever activities are happening at that site now?
Given the use that's on the site, I would say that I think it's Portland Solutions.
Portland Solutions, okay. Well, I guess what I would comment is I don't think the proposed change in zoning is going to matter. I think you're absolutely right. There's lots of process that would follow if there was a proposed housing use. But I think folks are here because we're the forum, and nobody else has been listening to them. And it seems to me the neighborhood certainly is entitled to some predictability about what's going to happen. We can't do that, but I think the city needs to do that. And I don't know who that is, and I don't think we're going to be able to do that through this zoning change. But I do think there needs to be some conversation. There needs to be a plan for this site that extends beyond just what we're doing today with Safe Rest Village.
And I want to echo something that you had said earlier, which we do have someone who is from Portland Solutions, if that is a question or a part of inquiry that,
I don't need to go down that road.
okay, okay.
I would just follow up with that by saying, I think we have seen precedents for development visions to be very inclusive of neighborhoods and even recognizing past commitments for uses. The Montgomery Park is a recent example of engagement with neighborhood and other organizations. So that's why I was trying to clarify that the additional process would be public-led. And today we've heard that there has been essentially a legacy of commitment by the city that the neighbors feel has not been met. So I think at a minimum, we're here to memorialize that and that we hear that and that I think for my part, at least, it would be aspirational that those conversations would continue. I know there was reference to a good neighbor agreement that's currently in place. And so also hoping that that engagement is continued around its existing use and what its future could be.
Perhaps this is an appropriate topic for the transmittal letter?
Yes, as part of our recommendation, regardless of what that is, we often then talk about a transmittal letter, which is, what are some themes that came up that we want to make sure that City Council is aware of, whether or not, and often if it is beyond the scope of what this specific decision is, that we want to make sure that they're aware, councilors are aware of future work and other things that need to be considered going forward. Great, thank you. Other questions? Yeah, Commissioner Brennan.
Dresha Brennan. Have other safe rest villages, and this is just, I do not know, but are their zones feasible for future affordable housing already? And is this the only one that's remaining that has not been changed?
I'm sorry. My understanding is with that a number of the safe rest villages are already in zones that allow the shelters, and many of them are in commercial mixed-use zones that provide options for housing. That's not always the case. I think there might be a couple that are industrial zones, and there is a proposal as part of Recap 11 to facilitate their continuation in industrial zones. There are no EG zones right now as part of Recap 11 because I think Multnomah site is the only one in an employment EG zone. But yeah, I think there are other courses forward for other safe rest villages.
Thank you.
Commissioner Knowles?
Sorry, I'm talking so much, but I do want to ask a question and make a point. I do want to talk about the TriMet site on 17th. So that's my recollection, and I looked at the satellite map just to remind myself. It's a very narrow site. It's a parking lot. I think it's probably no more than 100 feet deep, if that. And it is right up against single-family housing. So I don't know exactly how, even in a CM1, you do any sort of step-down that addresses that site constraint. So I think the testimony of the person who was on the phone was persuasive that perhaps the CM1 would be a better choice for this site. So I'm inclined to do that, but I'd like to hear from my fellow commissioners, and perhaps I'm the only one who thinks that's right.
I think that it's a question.
Could we, Bill, could you remind us the key differences in terms of development potential between CM1 and CM2? I know we heard from testimony a bit about the height limits, but then there's the affordable housing bonus provision. Could you just walk us through? I think, the uses are comparable, correct? It's really the density and height. That's the main difference.
Correct. The CM2 zone has a base floor to area ratio of 2.5 to 1, and the maximum height is 45 feet or 4 stories. And actually, in this zone, there is not the opportunity to get an additional floor through affordable housing bonuses. I think you have to be in a design overlay and a higher intensity comp plan designation. The CM1 zone is somewhat smaller in scale. Its maximum height is 35 feet or 3 stories, and I believe it's a 1.5 to 1 FAR. So it is a lower scale zone. One thing I've heard from some of our economic development people is that if people are interested in things like having ground floor commercial or services, it's harder to include that along with affordable housing. And some of our CM2 zones have had situations where they could fit in tuck under parking. But if you're limited to 3 stories maximum, it's harder to include some of these other things the community is interested in. And Commissioner Knowles is correct that one of the sites, the one that's at 17th and Roan, is a fairly constrained site. It might not be more than 100 feet deep or so, which is actually a pretty common configuration along our main streets, 100 feet of depth. But those also have the step down within 25 feet of an adjacent zone. And I should mention too that the EG1 zone that currently applies there allows 45 feet of height. So it's if we went for CM2, it would maintain the existing height that's already allowed in that zone, but it does open up opportunities for the housing.
Follow-up questions? Thoughts? I guess I'm also curious, folks had alluded to the Inner East Side for All infrastructure study previous. I'm curious, particularly in the Brooklyn neighborhood, what that, what is our future in terms of height in the area?
Commissioner, or Chair Routh, pardon me. We don't know for sure, right? We haven't not done that sort of technical work to know what the changes might be. But I will say that the focus there is going to be, not just relegated to the corridors. It's going to be looking at, areas, both the corridors and beyond the corridors. So there's an opportunity, that we would look at that area through that process. But I think for all the reasons that were described here, we thought it was appropriate to include it in this package.
Thank you. Questions? Commissioner Spivak.
I'm looking at this site. Because TriMet owns land north and south of Bush Street there, which it looks like at one point was vacated. Is the whole TriMet owned property proposed for rezone?
If you look at your plan, the actual report, it shades the properties that are proposed for zone changes. So one of them is along 17th between Holgate and Mall, and the other one is on 17th between, it's Roan, and it doesn't go all the way down to the next street. So I'm not sure if we're looking at the same properties in terms of.
I'm looking at the Roan one. I'm sorry, I don't have the other. Could you put up on the screen? Is this the one you were describing? Is it the one on Roan? That's the narrow one, right?
Well, there are two. Are there not 2 parking lots?
There are 2
there
sites.
are 2 sites.
Mhm.
One of them is at Roan and 17th, and the other one, and I think, here we are. The first one is, this is the somewhat smaller site, somewhat narrower site at Roan and 17th. And then we have the other one, maybe you could jump to that quickly, a larger site, and this is a little bit over half an acre and has basically a full block from east to west. That's also part of the proposal. Both of them are adjacent to existing single-dwelling development, and so both of them would be subject to things like a landscape setback adjacent to those residential zones and a step down. Of course, I think it's a 10-foot landscape setback that's required, which would probably impact a CM1 zone situation where you can't go up at all beyond 3 stories to a greater extent. I should mention too, in Southeast Portland, it's a very common situation to have CM2 zoning along our main streets and the next lots over have single-family zoning. Our purpose statements for zones indicate that the CM3 zone is not intended in locations adjacent to single family, but the CM2 zone is a zone we very commonly apply along neighborhood main streets that are adjacent to single family. And again, there are the step down and the setback requirements.
Thank you. I think I figured out the issue. The one on the, go back to the Roan site that Commissioner Knowles was describing.
Yes, and I should mention too that there's that narrow band you see is the buffer overlay. And because the mixed-use zones already have requirements for landscape buffer and step-downs, the proposal is to remove that buffer overlay. So that's one thing that can help a little bit. I should mention too that TriMet owns a number of other properties that are really narrow bands along 17th that they use for employee parking. And those are truly very narrow sites, and those are not being proposed for zone
Thank you. That's
changes.
what I was looking at, who owns what, and south of that gray rectangle is one of those narrow, even narrower sites that TriMet owns and seems to be used for parking.
Right, and no changes proposed to those what are truly kind of very constrained sites used for parking.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. I'd love to, if there are questions or thoughts specifically around the 17th Brooklyn site, since there is kind of almost sounds like a soft amendment on the floor. Is that? I mean, we're not an amendment point, but, just for discussion
No,
purposes.
I mean, I would support CM1 instead of CM2.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
But
Can I
if there's
for-
not interest in doing that, I don't want to prolong the discussion.
Yeah, no, great. Vice Chair O'Meara?
Mary Irene O'Meara for the record. I do think from an affordable housing production standpoint, economies of scale are important. And I completely understand the concerns of the scale going back to single family. I think that condition exists throughout our city. And if the intention of the project is to look at affordable housing production, that is more likely to occur with commercial ground floor under a CM2 as opposed to CM1 because of the financing challenges for those types of projects. So those would be my comments in relation to specific to affordable housing production in a mixed use environment.
May I take us to a slightly different place? East Portland? Great. A question around the gateway. Because it is in the TIF district, is this the one across the street, forgive me, across the street from what is currently the Gateway Shopping Center?
I
that
believe
separate?
you're referring to the Gateway Park Management Office property, and that's
Correct.
at Gleason and 101st,
Right.
I believe. It's adjacent to other affordable housing right across the street. To the west, there's affordable housing, and to the north. And this is a very small site. It's just 4,000 square feet. And my understanding is Home Forward is interested for the future of it to be really focused on residential. The RX and existing CX zone allow a similar development scale, but the CX tends to have more requirements at ground level for things that are somewhat more focused on commercial type uses.
Right.
And so RX, it doesn't change the intensity of development that's allowed. It simply allows a more purely residential project to happen without worrying about things like the ground floor windows.
Great. My main question was, is whether that was in the Gateway TIF catchment area, and if there's any consideration of like what first floor commercial would look like.
Yep. I believe it's in the TIF district, but I don't know about any consideration of ground floor, but it's, again, a very small site. Right now, it's I think a former small duplex building that's used as a management office for nearby residential. And so part of it is, there's not much you could do with a 4,000 square foot lot. It's either going to be a one-story commercial or a few floors of residential, maybe.
Great, okay. Thank you. That is helpful. And I'll just say that the Canton Grill, very excited about it. We've been waiting for a long time. The Prescott property, I appreciate that you bringing up its proximity to Scott Elementary, and I hope that, I just have a personal hope that it's allows for multifamily and multiple bedrooms. We do. Oregon still has the dubious distinction of having the most homeless families with children in the nation, and having new, more affordable housing near an elementary school is really important. The DeMar location, I'm just like going through and then mostly giving people a breath so you can reconsider what you would like to say next about the properties that we have been discussing recently. But the DeMar in the Centennial neighborhood, I appreciate that you mentioning the proximity to parks, because that often, particularly East Portland, that East Portland, even here, but prior to this, has the highest, we have the highest number generally of affordable housing lots. We are also amenity poor comparatively to the rest of the city. It's also, having grown up in East Portland and living there most of my life, that I know people who went to school who are still in East Portland and are unhoused, and that is where they live. It is their home. It is our home, and so when we can get more affordable housing, but we also, I really hope that we're tying all future affordable housing to amenities. That it is true that DeMar will be adjacent to a park. Also, Centennial is the largest neighborhood, and it does not have a coffee shop. So its relationship to sheltered third space is something that we really need to look at. So that's beyond the scope of this, but in a transmittal letter, something I would very much like to highlight for the, particularly for East Portland, which has the majority of these sites, even though we have not spoken of them, which I think also highlights the importance of developing in our new form of government social infrastructure that allows East Portlanders to feel that they are welcome here, because we have the most sites and we have received the fewest comments for those sites here. Okay. And that is my soapbox that I will now tuck away. Now that I've yammered, other thoughts, questions? I'm curious if it was on the docket to potentially have a recommendation this evening. I am curious what my fellow commissioners feel. Is that something that we feel is possible this evening? Yeah. I'm seeing yes, yes,
Yes.
yes, yes, yes. Okay. I almost shudder to ask, are there any amendments? Are we at a place where we would consider amendments on the fly? I'm looking at Director Diefendorfer of whether.
Pardon me. I mean, here at I think it's appropriate to ask if there are any ideas for amendments. If there aren't, then I think you would be asking for someone to introduce a motion.
Okay. Does anyone have?
I guess my only thought is, looking at going through each of the properties, and I mean, even when Home Forward was speaking about, we don't have any current plans, but you can kind of visualize what'll happen at those sites, all of them. It just, I struggle a little bit with the Sears Armory site. Just, I don't completely understand without like the city having some sort of a vision, and kind of, I guess, a lack of buy-in from the neighborhood. I guess it seems like the one anomaly in this plan, and I'm just trying to understand kind of how it fits into the whole thing. Because the rest of them, it's like, yeah, it makes total sense. But that one, just with, it being a safe rest village, I guess, in perpetuity is what we're thinking. I mean, because, we looked at, it's 3.6 acres and there's 100 people living there. That's not a ton of density if what we're trying to accomplish is to provide homes for people. So that's just the only reason why it's been the only thing I've been a little uneasy about, I guess, during the deliberation or review.
I'll just respond by saying, I think, to be frank, because it's a city-owned property, I think we have the ability to, put it in the mix at this time. I don't, this does not mean that we're looking for the ability to do a safe rest village in perpetuity. I think what this does mean, though, is that, the city has adopted successive housing emergencies. This site would not be able to have a safe rest village at all without a housing emergency, a declaration of a housing emergency. That housing emergency was renewed, and I believe it expires again in 2027. I think, this both allows for a safe rest village to continue whether or not there's a housing emergency, and it allows a future in which there could be permanent affordable housing. And that's merely the objective here.
I have a question for staff. Do we have the ability in a legislative zone change to condition the approval in some way, the way that you would if this was a quasi-judicial proceeding?
I don't believe so. I don't know, Bill, if you have some other insight into that.
It'd be useful to know what kinds of conditions are being considered or that you have in mind.
For example, you could say it's approved subject to the city developing a plan for the use, a long-term plan for the use of the site.
Commissioner Knowles, that's a zone change is either you're changing the zone or not. That would be putting a condition that would say the zone change only is in effect if they do a plan, and I just don't see a pathway to that.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
And here's where we're doing something that normally would be in front of a hearings officer, and we're acting like we're supposed to act like the hearings officer, except we can't do that because we're a legislative body. So it just feels a little weird. We need to at least, in my opinion, say something in the transmittal letter, because I'd like the city to somebody at the city to take responsibility for this, which they don't have to do as long as there's a housing emergency. Okay, that's my soapbox for tonight.
Commissioner Spivak.
I was having the same question of the conditioning. I think we hit that on a prior project. So it's a legal question ultimately. But for that site, I'm convinced by staff that I think that the proposed zoning allows multifamily housing, it allows current use, and it allows a West Side communication center. All of those things in a CM2 zone. The sites immediately north and south of it are multi-dwelling zones. Having what's the current zone? It's CE or something like that? EG, having EG in between two multi-dwelling zones seems kind of odd in itself. It seems like a historical spot zone. I'm not sure the history of it. So I generally think that the CM2 gives more options for the site beyond the current one, and I appreciate that the city doesn't have a plan for it. I wish that they did, but I'm also sympathetic, and I think that the current density of people living on the site is very low given the size of the site.
Vice Chair O'Mara, were you issuing as if to speak? Oh. Okay. I agree. I mean, I think what we're all hearing is, that the Sears feels a little different, and that what I am hearing is the larger deficit of trust that a zoning change would not necessarily impact, but that absolutely needs to be addressed. Because it feels untenable from what we're hearing. Yep. Are there any other thoughts of amendment? I'm hearing transmittal letter. Would anyone be interested in issuing a proposal?
Seconded.
Okay. Chair Knowles, or Commissioner Knowles proposes. So we have a second from Vice Chair O'Meara. Follows next is discussion. We have also discussed. Okay, I think we are at roll call time.
Commissioner Alvarado? Commissioner Ames?
Aye.
Commissioner Brannon?
Aye.
Commissioner Knowles?
Yes.
Vice Chair O'Meara?
Aye.
Commissioner Spivak?
Aye.
And Chair Routh?
Aye. Okay. Thank you very much. That passes. We have a transmittal letter, which it sounds like will be long, to talk about. Do we want to start with general overarching thoughts before we go to, I think, a few specific locations? It's like, yes, we need affordable housing.
Yeah, I think in general, I mean, what I'm hearing from, I'm not going to summarize, put words in other people's mouths, but I think in general, we're all very supportive of this initiative, where it came from, the sites that have been identified, the process that they use to engage, the different agencies and nonprofit affordable housing providers. But yeah, I think it would be worth, just based on the testimony and kind of what I've heard about the history of specifically that one property, to mention, I guess our desire to have the city, further engage with the community. And I don't know a lot, I don't live in Multnomah, but so I don't know what that engagements look like, but, just to kind of carry the torch for some of those folks that have been through this process over the last several years, to make sure that, the city understands that, there needs to be something figured out for the site. And, I mean, I think of some words about the density currently on the site, that's a lot of space for 100 people. So.
Other thoughts? Yeah, Commissioner Spivak?
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad the city did this project, and I will say I've gone personally with my own money through a zone change comp plan amendment, and it's a lot of work, and it goes all the way to city council, just like this is going to go all the way to city council. So I appreciate Commissioner Knowles' point that this puts us in a slightly awkward situation because we're looking at individual sites. But I also see for these nonprofits that have housing, having land that's where the zoning is a poor match for their current use or potential use, it saves a lot of time and expense, and not just the staff, but also the city to manage. I mean, there's a whole staff side to these type 3 processes, carrying that all the way through. So I appreciate that there's some efficiency of finding some projects where rezones are really important. There's a few contentious ones, but most are not. This is a great way to do it. It's once in a while.
Commissioner Alvarado?
Yeah, I'm not sure how to articulate this, so I'll try my best. I think like when I think about yes and no decisions on things of this nature, I think about the cost of like both like what's the liability to the city or what's the liability of saying no, um, and then what is the cost from like the folks who would potentially be impacted and the folks who would potentially live there as well, and you know, or not live there. And so I think like those are the things I'm trying to chew on and try to understand how these impacts will translate into um, the various ways that neighbors will be impacted, but also the folks who could potentially have homes and that may not. And so more of a editorial than a comment, but I think I'm just trying to weigh that. And also is there thinking about is what's the liability of removing a site, or is like, I don't know if that's played into this or if there is any liability of to the city.
Editorial and prose is what a transmittal letter is for. Great, thank you. Commissioner Brennan?
I just see these as opportunities. That's what they are. This is not a final decision on what will be there and what will be built. They're opportunities. They're removing some of the red tape for those opportunities to happen and provide housing for others. And so that's important. It's a need for the city, and some are contentious. But I also trust the city's process. It was nice to see the timeline of what they have done and the community outreach, and getting a postcard in the mail might seem like not very much, but I haven't really received very many postcards in East Portland for things in my neighborhood, except for Sunday Parkways, 4 of them, and that was it. So it was nice to see the timeline, and this was not something that was brought to us on a whim. There was some time. And many media articles about this as well. So I feel like there was a process that was public and transparent, and not all sites are like that. So with that, again, it's I'm just talking. It's not
No,
actually
this is great.
points.
And to add to that, you know, I moved to Lentz about 13 years ago, and since then we have, I believe, 4 new affordable housing, mostly affordable housing projects in my neighborhood, and they have, for me, been so in 1-2 blocks away. That was a former school site that is now the NEA Generations project. It has been so wonderful, particularly in that like the bar gets to stay. Like we now have enough, you know, foot traffic. But and for none of those did I get a Measure 56 notice that I recall. And I do think I want to respond to like this, the idea, the uncertainty around shelter and what we have said. I was frustrated during I don't know if this will go to a transmittal letter, but this is my other tiny soapbox. I was frustrated at the close of the Shelter to Housing Continuum project, which was supposed to, we were putting in policies that would, that we felt strongly, and we worked hard to really move us down the road in terms of building housing and zoning, and ensuring that shelters were sited in a way that was predictable. And as part of that, we were also told as a planning commission that that would also, because I think when we have a state of emergency, it says that our current policies are not working. This is I don't know if I was an opera theater double major, so if this is not correct, please correct me. But a housing, like a state of emergency of any kind, basically suspends a lot of policies. It creates this uncertainty for everyone, in saying like, we're in a space where we have to throw anything. Our policies have to be suspended. We need to try new things. At some point, we do need to have a process where we say this is our current reality, and we need to build policies that are then predictable, even if they are unpopular, but that people can understand and navigate through. I was very frustrated when City Council decided to reinstate a housing state of emergency at the close of that Shelter to Housing Continuum project, because I felt we were doing so much of everything that we could at this body to move us, including potentially, temporary shelters on golf sites. We were doing everything that we could. So I will just say, like, I can appreciate when people are saying that the continuing housing state of emergency is frustrating to navigate and is eroding trust of the city. I can appreciate that, and I think that we really need. I would really like to see that in a transmittal letter, that we need to really double down on policies that will allow people to understand, engage, and understand what our city's plan is. Because I think that there is a lot of push and pull, and over time that does erode trust, and trust in government is at a premium right now. So those are my thoughts. That is my soapbox. Other soapboxes?
Yes, thank you, Vice Chair O'Meara. For the record, a couple of comments. First, just always want to acknowledge the efforts of staff and everyone that has been involved in this process. I do want to acknowledge the setting of precedents, and I know Director Diefenderfer, you mentioned we don't see another one of these in our future, but when I think about the ability for folks to engage, right? We clearly have a large number of properties that are owned by Home Forward, which is a public agency. I'm so happy that this will enable the preservation of those homes and future development of those sites. But I still have a question around who else is out there. And when we set precedents, around the non-conforming use, for example, who has the capacity to pay attention? Right? And so I want to make sure that we're not closing the door completely on future rounds, and especially for affordable housing providers, but even potentially naturally occurring affordable housing, which are often privately owned. So want to keep the door open for future projects so that there is that potential, right, for others to say, I didn't know about this, and I've got a situation that I'd like to pursue. Specific to the former Sears site, I do want to acknowledge the desire for future public engagement and continued public engagement. I think the neighborhood is already doing a community service by hosting the village, and that at a minimum, continued dialogue around the vision for that site is really critical. It is hard for communities to, open their neighborhoods to these types of uses, and they're so critical. We all have to be willing to do that throughout the city. But, we also don't want to preclude future visioning engagement by those very same neighbors who are now hosting this site. So really want to emphasize that, desire for that future engagement specific to that site. Thank you.
Ronnie, specific to Commissioner Arenas mentioned, is that when we had the faith-based community version of this project a while ago, there was a small amount of technical assistance available to help congregations figure out what might be helpful for their properties in terms of rezones. And perhaps if this were done again, nonprofits that don't have the massive capacity that Home Forward does could benefit from understanding their portfolios, where they're out of compliance, rather than have to figure it out for themselves. So that's one idea. And to Chair Ralph's comment about the housing emergency, I agree it would be nice if, from the planning perspective, I think we did a lot in zoning to address the housing emergency needs, so it didn't have to continue being an emergency. But I will share, I was just back from Pasadena, where they've had wildfires. When they have a housing emergency, they get building permits processed in 5 days, right? So there's other parts of the city that could be acting more like an emergency, and planning is just one of them. Thanks.
Others? Okay. Do you all, was that enough? Was that too much?
Chair Ralph, that's fine. We will draft a letter and circulate it. So, yeah.
Great. Thank you. And for I can't assume that, I can't imagine that we would know which dates this goes to council, but it would, from what I understand, it would go to a committee. And then, and allow for other public testimony before going to the full council.
Chair Routh, we just want to confirm that you closed both the oral and written testimony.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. With apologies to Mark, very specifically.
Is it actually clear what the process is from here going to council? Because there's been discussion about committee structure and.
What's clear is every item will go to a committee and then every item will go to full council. So there's maybe some conversation about the structure of those committees, but ultimately that is the path.
And let's just, since we have folks in the room who are concerned about the Sears site, what is the notification protocol for recommendations from the Planning Commission going to council committees?
For notifications, anyone who would provide a testimony to the, on the proposed draft would also receive notice of the upcoming city council session. And also, our usual legislative notice would go out to people who requested to be updated or to receive notice about
So
legislative
there's
projects.
a mechanism to be notified of the next steps.
We also have a project, the website allows people to sign up for project updates. So that would be another means to reach people who want to be notified.
Sure, okay, thank you.
Great question, thank you. Other thoughts? I never thought that we would get out before 8.
We have
Is there
another
one more?
agenda item.
Oh, thank
Chair Routh,
heavens.
we have
I was so
it's
worried.
more of a briefing training item on the economic opportunities analysis.
Thank you, I'm so sorry. I need to learn to read. Okay. Bill Ector, thank you so much for your work.
Thank you.
Now we are on to the comp plan economic development chapter, and this is an informal presentation. Tom, I was wondering what you were doing in the back, and now I know. Lord.
So, Commissioners, this is an informational briefing. It's about the economic development chapter of the comprehensive plan, and it is really kind of a primer to prepare the commission for the economic opportunities analysis, which will be coming later this year. Chair Routh, I don't know if you want to maybe take just a couple of minutes. It seems like people are in need of restroom and other.
3 minutes? Okay, 7:35. Thank you.
Good, how are you?
All right.
Good.
It's been a while.
I'm gonna see more
You're
of
gonna
you.
see more of me too over the next.
All right.
Oh, I thought you were about to break out.
Oh, no.
Oh,
Park Planning Commission, the musical. Okay, amazing. Okay, let us reconvene. Oh, sorry. Let us stop you. Yes, yes. Sorry. Thank you for reminding me we had. These things are doing, it's like, wow. Yeah. It's like, is he testifying in a personal capacity? Like, okay. Okay, we're back for Act 3.
All right.
And again, this is an informal presentation around the economic development chapter with Tom Armstrong. So thank you very much for being here. Please take it away.
Good evening. I'm Tom Armstrong. I'm a supervising planner here at BPS, and I manage our housing and economic policy team. And we are responsible for the long-range growth forecasting that underlays a lot of our comprehensive planning work. And what I have for you tonight is an overview of our economic policy framework, and to really sort of go over what is in Chapter 6 of the comprehensive plan, and share with you some recent economic and employment trends that are going on in the city, and talk a little bit about what you will see later this year when we bring forward the update to the economic opportunities analysis, which I will explain that the economic opportunities analysis is a lot like the housing needs analysis. It's a background supporting document to the comprehensive plan. It is both a combination of a long-range growth forecast on the employment side for the city, and includes a buildable land inventory development capacity analysis that then informs the goals and policies in the comprehensive plan, and then is a key part, as I'll explain in a minute, in making decisions that affect the zoning on employment lands and employment capacity. Just some high-level overview for you tonight. Key takeaways, we are fortunate to have a good mix of different businesses and employment opportunities throughout the city. That I would say prior to the pandemic, we were experiencing very robust economic growth, but that the city itself has lagged in the post-pandemic recovery, and that then looking forward, both at a national level, a state level, a regional level, and at the city level, we are planning for growth, but that is at a slower pace that we had seen previously, and we'll get into some of those factors. We also have a particular focus on equitable economic opportunity, and a focus on middle wage jobs, especially for those people without college degrees, and what kind of opportunities can be found in Portland. And I think that's where in particular we have found that the industrial and office sector jobs provide those opportunities for higher incomes. And then in terms of industrial land supply, I think, in Portland, it has been tight for a long time, and it is getting tighter. But at the same time, we have more than 14,000 acres of industrial and employment zone land that supports over 100,000 jobs in Portland. So we have a strong industrial base. We just don't have a lot of options that other cities have to continue to expand our UGB and grow out. And this will become a key issue when we get to the economic opportunities analysis, the EOA, and that how do we maximize the use of our current industrial land base, and how do we leverage other opportunities such as the office sector or even the healthcare sector to provide other middle wage opportunities. The comprehensive plan policies and the EOA really are a long-term look, and they sit sort of in and work with two other documents that guide economic development planning in the city. And these two documents, the Greater Portland Community Economic Development Strategy, or CEDS, what we currently call Advanced Portland, are more of the short-term economic development strategies that lay out sort of a 5 to 7 year action plan look for guiding economic development decisions in the short term. I think what you see here, so the CEDS document is prepared by Greater Portland, Inc., the Regional Economic Development Agency, and Metro. And it is a document that helps qualify the region for federal grants to support economic development. And then, as I said, Advanced Portland is the city's version of that document. That process is led by Prosper Portland. And both of these documents are updated on a 5-year cycle. And you'll see here there's a lot of common themes that run through both these documents as well as the comprehensive plan policies. And you'll see that pop up in a couple of places here. So the comprehensive plan, we have 3 broad range goals that really guide our thinking around economic development, and that has to do with prosperity and supporting future development, and then also looking at the various business districts in the city and supporting their vitality, both existing business as well as future growth. In terms of sort of prosperity and looking forward, we have a number of policies that really support future economic development and the idea of growing and expanding our economy. Policy 6.3 it really establishes a goal of ours to capture about at least 25% of the regional employment growth. We currently have about 44% of the region's jobs here in Portland. Before the pandemic, we were in the mid 30s in terms of like in the 20 teens, but since then we've actually been losing jobs and have overall and have not fully recovered from the pandemic. And I'll show a little bit more of that here. Here's what I was getting at is that we used 2019 as sort of that benchmark. What was pre-pandemic, where did we sit, and how are we looking going forward? We're still down about 27,000 jobs. Most of those are in the retail, hospitality, and office sectors. But here again, to my earlier point, we have a pretty good distribution of jobs between these larger employment sectors. Not really over reliant on one sector. but can look at a multi-pronged economic development strategy to grow jobs in the future. In terms of land development, which is sort of key to the comprehensive plan and the zoning policies. We have one about land supply. Key to this is a requirement at the state level, statewide planning goal 9. And the core to that is that each city in Oregon has to demonstrate that they have an adequate development capacity to accommodate 20 years of growth. And we have a similar one through Goal 10, housing, and a whole housing needs analysis, housing production strategy around that. There's a parallel to that with Goal 9, and that's really what drives our thinking and working around the economic opportunities analysis, the EOA. And you'll see a lot in the EOA around land development and constraints on land development, especially in the industrial sector, and really looking at what can we do to reduce barriers, to encourage more intensive use of our employment base. The other one of the other focuses really is on what we call the traded sector, which is think about those jobs that sell services and products that go outside the region and bring income into the region, and that is the money that then gets circulated around the region that supports a lot of the goods and services. One way to think about that is sort of where do people spend their income on, or what businesses are supported by consumers, customers. If you think about a restaurant, right? I don't know what it is, but let's say 75% of the business is local and 25% of the business might be tourism. That tourism is that's dollars coming into the region. The 75% local are dollars that are circulating within the region. We have a pretty strong traded sector with the port and our rail yards and our interstate, but that it's not just goods, it's also services. We have a lot of consulting businesses, architecture, finance, green building, that those businesses get contracts and do work outside the region. That's income coming into the region itself. And so I think we have another, so when we look at sort of what we call those target industries or clusters, on the left here, we have the Advanced Portland strategy have identified. These are sort of the businesses where we have an existing cluster strength of existing businesses that provide us an advantage that we can grow. We have a labor force, we have businesses, we have a supply chain. And what Greater Portland Inc. is more of that regional look, and Business Oregon is the state look, but you see a lot of common industries. And it's part of that economic ecosystem, the supply chain, the labor, the workforce training, the business connections that really sort of from both a citywide and a regional basis reinforce each other and give us that local advantage. In terms of sort of the land supply, if you think about what is needed for economic development, there are sort of three factors, basic factors, right? You have the businesses, the finance, the money. You have the labor, the workforce, and you have the land supply, where that activity actually happens. And when it comes to the comprehensive plan again, and the zoning and the EOA, it is about that. What is the land supply that we have available to support that economic development? What you see before you is a table out of the 2016 EOA, and this is the table, the focus that we will be updating as part of the new EOA that really shows, starting with the demand side, where we expect jobs to grow in the future over the next 20 years. And we go through a process to figure out how to convert those jobs into a land demand or a building space demand. And then the supply, that buildable land inventory. What is the development capacity under current zoning? Where do we have vacant and redevelopable land that can be used for those employment purposes? And then the reconciliation is that goal 9 part. Do we have enough supply to accommodate expected demand? And what you see from this table is in areas like the central city or our neighborhood commercial districts, especially in areas where we can go up, we have a lot of capacity to accommodate future employment uses. Back in 2016, we were looking at our campus institutions, our hospitals and colleges, and we found that they were pretty constrained in their capacity to grow. We had a conditional use campus master plan process that they would have to go through every 10 years. And as part of that 2016 process and the comprehensive plan update that was going on there, we created a new zone for them, the campus institution zone, and created new development standards, increased the building heights and floor area ratios in there, and created a lot of capacity on the existing campuses that sort of created that surplus in to accommodate that future growth. What you see here in terms of industrial is that tight industrial supply. We had 111 acre surplus at that time. We've actually nibbled away at that with various decisions. The manufactured dwelling park zoning took a little bit of that. Some changes along 82nd Avenue, most recently the Montgomery Park Plan. And so we are focused on that industrial land supply because it's so tight. And also, as you will see in the EOA, we have a number of significant policy decisions to make around natural resource protection and community livability that also compete for that industrial land supply in that same location. And so that's sort of why we always keep coming back to talking about industrial jobs, because of that tight land supply and needing to sort of reconcile those policy decisions within the context of Goal 9. As I said before, we have a lot of focus around equitable household prosperity, and I'll go through some slides here just because, and this shows up on the housing affordability as well, because so many households are struggling. And one of the ways to help with that struggle is to provide better jobs, higher income jobs for Portland workers and for people in Portland. One of the measures that we look at is what's called income self-sufficiency. And that is basically it looks at the cost of living in Multnomah County and what it takes to support a household. And it varies depending on the type of household, right? And what you see here is, do you have one adult? Do you have two income earners? Are you having to support kids in the household? And those costs vary. But what you see here is the income, as of 2024, the income needed to support a household, and then the equivalent hourly wage that is needed for that to afford your rent, afford the food, the insurance, the transportation costs. that's sort of, that benchmark. Yes, Steph?
I'm just curious why the self-sufficiency standard is less for one preschooler plus one school-age person as opposed to one adult and one preschooler, like
That is a
school-age person
good
hustling?
question.
Or,
I don't know. We can look deeper into. Work Systems, Inc. is the regional workforce development agency, and they're the ones that look at this and prepare this report. But we can bring that information back to you. And
I mean, I worked under the table when I was a kid, but I don't expect that.
Me too.
yeah, yes. I think this next slide really shares information around that income self-sufficiency measure and how it is eroded over time. And what you see here are 3 snapshots in time, 2008, 2017, and 2024, and sort of 2 different types of households. The one on the left is a single adult with 2 different wage scales. The lower wage, think minimum wage type jobs, and how far above or below that line. This is the struggle that you see, and that in particular with the middle wage incomes and how that is really begun eroding, and even what you see for a 4-person family, how you're starting to see that drop below the line even for a middle wage household. The other thing that we look at are racial income disparities, and this is for regional data, and again, looking at how that has changed over time between 2010 and 2023. And I would say you are seeing it slightly better, but still vast differences, in terms of different racial and ethnicities in terms of their incomes. And that's why we begin to look at particularly BIPOC workers without college degrees and what those opportunities are to raise their household incomes. This is another look at that and thinking about sort of middle wage jobs or the lack of middle wage job opportunities and how that's changed over the last 20 plus years. You will see that on the left is the Portland region and the wider 7-county region, but we're the core of that, and the U.S. trends. You will see we have similar trends, but in some ways they're even more exacerbated with high wage job growth in the Portland region, that really is putting that upward pressure on prices, especially housing prices, right? You have a lot of people coming into the region, or we're coming into the region with well-paying jobs that can compete for that available, bidding up house prices in particular. And again, sort of thinking about what is that opportunity, to create those middle wage jobs. And so, this is a complicated graph here, but what you're seeing is what we've looked at regional occupations and what their median wage is, and the share of workers, along the x-axis, left to right, the share of workers that have 4-year college degrees. And we're really looking at sort of that bachelor degree and higher, not the associate's degree or a training certificate, something. We recognize that a lot of these jobs, like manufacturing or healthcare support, require some sort of beyond high school, but our demarcation is really that 4-year bachelor's degree or higher. And you know, the Y scale is the income level. And so what you see in the dark blue in the upper right is those occupations that are really that high wage occupations, those that pay more than $65,000 a year. And then what you see in the light blue are what we think are the middle wage occupations. And then down there in the lower left-hand corner are in the reddish brown are the lower wage occupations, the food preparation, the building maintenance. And then there is again another split between those middle wage occupations in terms of, again, the ones on the left are those that typically do not require a 4-year college degree, whereas the ones on the right, the education, community service jobs, surprisingly, you know, arts and entertainment, you have a lot of people with 4-year degrees. And so we begin to look at, you know, those light blue jobs on the left that tend to be the industrial, you know, manufacturing, construction, the healthcare support, you know, the back office, administrative office jobs, surprisingly, some sales jobs, and those tend to be not necessarily retail sales, but, you know, think real estate agent or car dealers or other jobs that, you know, surprisingly don't have a lot of people with 4-year college degrees, but still can earn a pretty good wage. But this is the kind of disparities that we're trying to solve for, to provide those opportunities. So the other part of this, and the other way that was sort of the larger employment sectors, and the other way we look at this is around what we call our geographies. And now we're talking about places, the places where these jobs occur. And we look at four major geographies that I'll get into: the central city, our industrial districts, our campus institutions, our neighborhood business districts. And then, you know, we really have a fifth one that really is emerging post-pandemic as a strong source of job growth, and that's our residential neighborhoods. And that's a mix of home occupations. We have much greater technology that support working from home and setting up your own micro enterprise at home. But that also includes other jobs like, you know, our schools that are in our neighborhood, but also our preschools, our daycares, our adult care facilities, our residential health care that occur in the neighborhood. And those are becoming strong sources of jobs that don't have really big land demands that go with it. But there are things that we see in the future that we could do to support those jobs and growing those jobs in our neighborhoods. So this is another way of looking at that and how that plays on the map. And what you see in blue is the central city, and you know that is both sides of the river. It's downtown, it's the Pearl District, it's the Lloyd District, it's the Central East Side and South Waterfront, and that mix of jobs. And one way to think about it is those jobs have a certain building type. You know, our office buildings. You know, it includes you know, places like Portland State and OHSU on the South Waterfront, but that tends to be the higher density building types. And so then, and contrast that to the red areas, which are neighborhood commercial districts that have a lower scale type, smaller scale uses. It's sort of a different mix of building spaces that, again, is different from the types of buildings that you find in our industrial districts and then our campus institutions. And so how those, again, this is another way of looking at, again, how those jobs spread out through. This time we're looking at the geographies. We have about a third of our jobs in the central city. A quarter of our jobs in our neighborhood business districts, almost a quarter of jobs in our industrial districts, and then, some more jobs in rounding it off in our campuses and our residential areas. But at the same time, think of these geographies of having a mix of jobs, right? So if you think about the central city, we have office jobs, we have healthcare jobs, we have retail jobs, we even have a little bit of, especially in the Central East Side, we still have some industrial and distribution jobs there and the lower Albina area. Likewise, the flip side is our industrial areas. They're predominantly manufacturing and distribution jobs, but we do have some retail jobs, some back office jobs, some office headquarters. So each of these geographies have that mix of jobs, and so the geographies are dominated by certain types of jobs, but they do have that mix, and we look at how that mix changes over time. So in terms of the central city, a lot of this is encompassed, and more of the detail is found in the Central City 2035 plan. But again, we're looking at both sort of the west side of the river and downtown, and our more commercial heavy focus, as well as the industrial districts on the east side. In terms of neighborhood business districts, we have a lot of policies about supporting small independent businesses. I think you will see, for both in our neighborhood business districts and in the central city as part of the EOA, some of the strategies we're looking at is how can we encourage more temporary uses, pop-up markets and restaurants to activate that vacant space, to provide an opportunity for people to grow their home-based business and into more of a brick and mortar type, or at least try it out. And so, a real focus on how can we grow those businesses that we already have and leverage those opportunities. Again, with campus institutions, I think we did a big heavy lift back in 2016. We will be checking in with our hospitals and colleges to see what more we can do from a land use perspective to help support them. We were really looking at, both how can we help support the campuses, as well as how can we better integrate them with the community? How is that edge of the campus, is it presenting a friendly edge? How can we bring the community into those campuses and support sort of a wider range of uses that may be not as insular to campuses, but it can bring the community into those campuses? And then finally, our industrial and employment districts, we have had in the city of Portland since the early 1980s an industrial sanctuary policy. And think of that as the equivalent at the statewide level of our farmland and forest land preservation policies, and really trying to preserve our industrial areas for industrial businesses and not allowing a lot of leakage of what could be conflicting uses, and that could be conflicting on competing for price. Office and retail uses can afford to pay higher rents and outbid industrial businesses for space, and sort of wanting to limit those retail and office opportunities within our industrial areas, but also housing. similar to the farmland preservation, wanting to limit and exclude housing from our industrial areas, from a health perspective, but also from a sort of a neighbor complaint perspective, and really have these areas. This goes way back to sort of the original, what they call Euclidean zoning at the turn of the last century, and wanting to separate the stinky, noisy uses away from where people live. And so this industrial sanctuary policy was a manifestation of that. And then as part of the 2016 comprehensive plan update, we sort of took it a step further. We were building off of some regional policies that Metro had around prime industrial land, and really tightened up what could occur in our industrial sanctuaries. I think that the main one was that you could no longer do quasi-judicial zoning changes to convert industrial land to a different use. It had to be through a legislative process. And I think that's one of the reasons why you saw the Montgomery Park Plan come through as a legislative process. And so not all of our industrial land is designated as prime industrial land. I think it's around 90% of it is. And so really wanting to preserve that opportunity. I think the other thing that you will see going forward is around brownfield redevelopment. We have a lot of old legacy industrial businesses left behind, a lot of contamination, and this even goes beyond the Portland Harbor Superfund. It's a barrier. That liability is a barrier to redevelopment, and we want to explore what things that we could do at the city, especially in terms of financial incentives, to encourage that redevelopment, get those lands back into productive use, more intensive employment uses, and frankly, what we've seen, within a relatively short time frame, pay that money, that incentive back in terms of tax revenue, both at the state level and at the local level, in addition to providing these job opportunities.
Tom, I want to first apologize that we did you dirty in
I've got like
your-
2 slides left.
Are we good
and
with
then
like
I can
5 more minutes? Is that
take any questions, and I will be back for more.
excellent? Thank you.
So, this is again another way of looking at that middle wage job opportunity challenge. On the left, you see the employment wage profile of our industrial and sort of mixed employment areas, and that that the middle wages make up the bulk of that, 57% of the jobs that occur in those districts. Whereas if we look at our mixed use centers and corridors, you have more of a U shape. You have a lot of jobs on the low end of the scale and a lot of jobs on the high end of the scale, and fewer opportunities in the middle of that. And that's, about 60% of our middle wage jobs are in industrial sectors. Another 30% are in office sectors, and another 10% are healthcare type jobs. And this is another way to bring that together with that development capacity that again really shows the tight land supply in those industrial districts for those middle wage job opportunities, and how we have lots of capacity for low wage jobs, especially in our neighborhood commercial districts, and lots of capacity for our high wage jobs in the central city. And that really, again, another way of looking at how we keep coming back to talking about what's going on in our industrial districts. But with that tight supply, having to come back and look at, well, what else can we do in these other areas where we have lots of room to grow to support those small businesses and those more middle wage opportunities. So again, with the EOA, we're looking at taking, going out from 2035 out to 2045. What is the sort of new mix of jobs that we're expecting, and how can we support a more inclusive prosperity, and then to really set up and have a coordinated aligned decision around what goes along in our industrial districts, and how do we achieve our natural resource protection goals and our community livability goals at the same time, and to make that coordinated decision, that a more holistic decision than we have in the past. That's what I got for you tonight.
Are there any burning questions that folks have? And also, when would you be back next so that we can hold the questions?
We'll be back late in probably in December. We are looking to release the discussion draft of the EOA later this month, and kick off an engagement process, community engagement process, to get feedback on a number of these different policy alternatives. And then once we've considered that, we'll roll that into a proposed draft and bring that forward to you to consider.
Could you kindly share with us, as there are listening opportunities or community presentations with us, so that we can engage?
We will have a couple of online presentations, as well as some open houses to talk about this.
Because I think this is going to be a big one. It's been long anticipated, and the more runway I think we can have as humans would be good.
Yeah.
Share those slides.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, thank you for staying. Thanks to Open Signal for staying. Anyone who is still online and watching us, thank you for staying. You're amazing. And appreciate everyone being willing to take some extra time here. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Yeah.
Home occupation?
Yeah.
We tinkered around with it a little bit with recap 10. Is that potentially, but I look at other cities that go way. That potentially for those